You've been lied to about what it means to release stress and worry. They told you it happens when life finally slows down, when the bills are paid, the body feels good, and everyone around you is happy. But if that were true, why do even calm moments still feel heavy? Why does your mind race when the world is quiet? Why do you carry worries no one else can see? The truth is, freedom from stress doesn't come from fixing everything outside you. It comes from understanding what's happening inside. For thousands of years, Buddhist wisdom has shown the way. Not through blind faith or endless rituals, but through clear seeing, understanding how thoughts arise, how they fade, and how the storm of worry is only made of passing clouds. Tonight, you're not here to escape your stress. You're here to see through it, to watch it dissolve like mist in morning light. Because when you understand how the mind works, you stop being its prisoner and start becoming its master. As you listen, your breath will slow, your body will soften, and the noise in your head will begin to quiet. You'll remember that nothing you feel is permanent, that calm was never lost, only hidden beneath the noise. This isn't just another track to help you sleep. This is a journey back to your true self, the one that knows how to let go, how to rest, and how to be free from the weight of stress and worry. Are you ready? Let's begin. The noise fades, and what's left is you breathing, existing, aware. For so long, the mind has been fighting shadows it couldn't see clearly. Tonight, that changes. There's something most people never learn about stress. It feels solid, it feels personal, it feels like it owns you. But what if everything you've ever felt, every fear, every rush of panic, every knot in your chest was nothing more than a passing reflection on the surface of awareness? What if stress itself was empty of any real substance? The Buddha taught that all things arise from causes and conditions, and when those causes end, the thing disappears. Stress is no different. It's not a monster waiting in the dark. It's a pattern made of thought, memory, and reaction. The mind labels a sound, a word, a moment, and builds a whole story around it. Then that story becomes heavy. You call it anxiety. You call it pressure. But when you look closer, there's nothing solid there. It's like mist pretending to be a wall. This is the heart of shunyata, emptiness. Not emptiness as in nothingness, but emptiness as in freedom from fixed meaning. Everything you experience, including worry, exists only because the mind gives it form. Stress feels real because attention feeds it. It's like feeding a fire with thoughts and then being surprised by the heat. The moment you stop adding fuel, the flame fades on its own. Think of a time you were worried about something that never happened. The sleepless nights, the tight stomach, the endless rehearsing of what could go wrong. Then reality unfolded, and all that tension vanished like smoke. Where did it go? It wasn't buried in your body. It didn't float away to the sky. It simply ceased because it was never a solid thing. It existed only as long as you believed it. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he saw this truth clearly. Suffering exists, but it has no self. It's born, it changes, it dies. Stress, anxiety, fear, they're waves on the surface of the mind. You don't need to fight them. You only need to stop mistaking them for who you are. Awareness is the ocean. The waves can't harm it. The mind constantly tries to turn sensations into stories. A sound becomes an interruption. A delay becomes failure. A silence becomes rejection. These stories create the illusion of stress. But when you drop the story and just observe the raw experience, the quick heartbeat, the trembling hands, the tight throat, something magical happens. The sensations lose their bite. They stop being stress and become energy moving through you. That energy was never your enemy. It was just life asking to be felt. Buddhist teachers often say, don't chase calmness. Understand disturbance. When you see what stress really is, impermanent, dependent, hollow, it can no longer control you. You don't get rid of stress by fighting it. You dissolve it by seeing through it. Like realizing a mirage isn't water, the thirst ends by understanding, not by chasing. Look closer at your thoughts right now. Each one arises and passes, like clouds drifting across an open sky. You can't stop them from forming, but you don't have to build a house beneath every one. When you stop clinging to thoughts, the mind reveals its natural state, spacious, bright, untouched. That space is always there. Stress only hides it temporarily, like a curtain drawn across the window. Shunyata invites you to look at your own experience without judgment. Stress feels real because it hooks into identity. My job, my health, my future. The moment you say my, you give it roots. You personalize what was only passing energy. But when you see it as just a pattern, not a person, the roots lose their grip. You begin to sense a quiet beyond reaction, a stillness that doesn't depend on anything. In modern life, we treat stress like a badge of honor. People brag about how busy they are, how little they sleep, how much they juggle. Yet, beneath the noise, there's a deep exhaustion, the soul's hunger for simplicity. Buddhism doesn't tell you to escape life. It teaches you to meet it without distortion. When you understand emptiness, stress doesn't vanish because the world changes. It vanishes because perception changes. You stop adding weight to things that were always light. Look at your body right now. Every breath, every heartbeat is happening without your effort. Life takes care of itself. Stress arises when the mind forgets that truth and tries to control what was never its job. Emptiness is the reminder that there's no separate you running the show, just life unfolding moment by moment. The more you trust that flow, the less you need to carry. There's a story of a monk who carried a heavy bag across a river. When he reached the other side, his teacher asked, "Why are you still holding it?" The monk laughed and dropped it. That's the whole teaching. Stress is the bag. The crossing is your life. And freedom is simply remembering to let go. You might wonder, if stress is empty, why does it feel so real? Because the mind gives it power through belief. You think a stressful thought, then you believe it, then the body reacts. It's a loop. Thought feeds feeling, feeling feeds thought, until you forget you're the one who started it. But when awareness steps in and sees the loop clearly, it breaks. The thought loses authority, and the feeling dissolves back into space. This is what meditation reveals. It's not about stopping thought, but about seeing thought for what it is: sound without solidity. When you sit and watch the mind, at first it's chaos, but slowly something deeper emerges. The watcher, the pure awareness that doesn't change no matter what appears. That awareness is not stressed, not anxious, not afraid. It's just aware. When you rest there, stress loses its home. Neuroscience even mirrors this truth. Studies show that when people observe their emotions mindfully, the brain's stress response softens. The amygdala, the alarm center, quiets down. Awareness itself changes the chemistry of the body. This is not philosophy, it's direct experience supported by science. So how do you practice this? The next time worry arises, don't rush to fix it. Pause. Feel it fully, without naming it. Ask yourself, what is this made of? You'll notice it's made of sensations, of fleeting thoughts, of breath that comes and goes. None of it stays. None of it defines you. Keep looking until you see through the shape of the worry, like seeing through glass. Once you see it's empty, it can't trap you. In that seeing, a quiet joy appears. Not the loud happiness of success or excitement, but a soft peace born from understanding. You realize you don't need to control the mind to be free. You only need to see its nature. Thoughts will still come, but they'll lose their gravity. They'll float, and you'll float with them, untethered. Buddhist monks often say, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." It means nothing you experience is separate from the space that holds it. Stress is form, it arises, has texture, sensation, but its essence is emptiness. You can't find a permanent core in it. It's not solid. Knowing this doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you compassionate, patient, wise. You start to treat your own mind like a child having a nightmare with tenderness, not fear. In daily life, this understanding becomes a shield. When someone criticizes you, you see their words as sound vibrations through air, not personal attacks. When plans collapse, you see it as shifting conditions, not failure. The world doesn't stop being unpredictable, but you stop being shaken by it. That's the power of emptiness. It's not cold detachment. It's the warmth of freedom. You begin to notice that the mind loves to fill space. It can't stand silence, so it creates stories. It says, "You're behind. You're not enough. Something's wrong." But these are just echoes. When you don't feed them, they fade. And in that fading, you discover a truth so simple it almost feels like a secret. There was never anything wrong with you. There was only misunderstanding. Life becomes lighter when you stop insisting that every feeling needs fixing. Stress loses its roots when you stop calling it mine. You start to meet life as it comes, fully, openly, without resistance. The rain falls, the sun rises, thoughts appear, thoughts fade. The flow continues, and you are the witness, calm at the center. In the stillness of awareness, even strong emotions become gentle. Fear becomes a vibration. Anger becomes warmth in the chest. Sadness becomes tenderness. When you stop turning them into enemies, they reveal their hidden wisdom. Every emotion points back to life itself, moving, breathing, transforming. This understanding doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful in a new way. You act without panic. You speak without haste. You live without the tightness of control. When you see through the illusion of stress, action becomes cleaner, lighter, more effective. The mind becomes a servant again, not the master. Shunyata is not about withdrawing from life, it's about meeting it without distortion. Stress and worry distort reality like heat rising off asphalt. They make you see trouble where there's only movement. When the mind cools, the road appears straight again. That clarity is the real peace people spend their lives chasing. It was never far, it was just buried under illusion. This teaching also reveals compassion for others. When you see how your own stress is empty, you understand others' suffering too. You stop blaming. You stop resenting. You see that everyone is trapped by their own mirages, believing thoughts that aren't true. This understanding softens the heart. You become gentle not because you're weak, but because you see clearly. To live with this awareness is to walk through the world, light-footed. You still feel, still care, but nothing sticks. Like writing on water, everything passes as soon as it's formed. That's the freedom of emptiness, life fully lived, yet unburdened. Even in moments of pressure, you'll sense a deeper stillness underneath. The phone rings, the deadline looms, the world pulls, but awareness stays unmoved. It's like hearing thunder without fear of the storm. The sound is there, but it doesn't shake the ground beneath you. When you understand this, sleep comes easily. The body knows it's safe. The mind stops fighting itself. You rest not because everything is perfect, but because you finally see that nothing needs to be. This is the heart of the path, not to escape stress, but to awaken to its emptiness. When you see that clearly, even the heaviest worry loses its power. What remains is pure awareness, spacious, silent, free. And in that silence, a new kind of strength appears, the strength of ease. So as you lie here, breathing slowly, remember this: the thoughts in your mind are clouds. The awareness watching them is the sky. The clouds come and go, but the sky has never been harmed by a single storm. That sky is you, untouched, open, infinite. Now let the breath move freely. Let the body soften. Let the stories dissolve. What's left is stillness, deep and kind. Stress is not who you are. It was never real in the way you thought. It was only a shadow passing through light. And tonight, that light, your awareness, is shining brighter than ever. Rest in that space. There's nothing to fix, nothing to fear, nothing to hold. Just the quiet truth unfolding in every breath. That all things, even worry, are empty, and in that emptiness, you are free. As the quiet settles deeper into your body, the last traces of tension begin to fade. The truth of emptiness has opened a new space inside you, wide, silent, and alive. But awareness alone is not the end. To be truly free from stress and worry, you must understand how they are born. Because even when you see through the illusion, the patterns of the mind still try to rebuild themselves. They form new worries, new fears, new reasons to suffer. Tonight, we go further into the root of anxiety itself, where the chain begins. There's a reason the Buddha didn't just talk about suffering, but about its creation. He saw that nothing appears by accident. Every emotion, every thought, every burst of fear has a cause. It's not random, it's a sequence. Stress arises the same way fire does, with fuel, heat, and oxygen. Remove one, and the fire dies. The law of dependent origination, or pratitya samutpada, shows how this chain of creation happens in the mind. When you see the links clearly, you stop feeding them, and what once ruled you begins to dissolve. Anxiety doesn't begin in the moment you feel it. It begins long before that, in a spark of perception, in a whisper of memory, in a small thought the mind takes too seriously. The Buddha described 12 links in the chain, but the essence is simple. Things appear dependent on other things. Stress isn't born from life itself. It's born from the mind's reaction to life. When a sound, a word, or a glance touches the senses, the mind interprets it. That interpretation creates a story. The story births emotion. The emotion creates craving or resistance. And from that, suffering unfolds. It begins with not knowing, avidya, ignorance. Not ignorance as in lack of education, but the forgetting of truth. You forget that thoughts are thoughts and take them as reality. You forget that emotions are visitors, not owners. In that forgetting, the illusion begins. The mind builds a self, a me, who must protect, control, and survive. Once that false self appears, the rest of the chain unfolds naturally. The I believes in threats, believes in problems, believes in stress. Yet all of it comes from that single misperception. When you look at your daily life, you can see this process in real time. You read a message that feels cold. Instantly, thought interprets, "They're upset with me." The body reacts, heartbeat quickens, muscles tense. Then comes worry. Did I do something wrong? The thought grows roots. I'm not good enough. The story becomes emotion. The emotion becomes behavior, and suddenly, you're lost in anxiety. But if you pause at the first spark, if you see that the story is just a thought, the chain breaks. The body softens, the mind breathes, and the wave passes. The Buddha called this insight yoniso manasikara, wise attention. It means tracing experience back to its cause. Don't just feel stress, study it. Where did it begin? What triggered the first ripple? You'll notice that every wave of worry is born from contact. Something touches the mind through the senses. But the contact itself is harmless. A sound is only vibration. A word is only air. It's the interpretation that gives it power. When you train yourself to notice the gap between contact and meaning, you step into freedom. In that small gap lies everything awareness, choice, peace. But we miss it because the mind is fast. It jumps from event to reaction in a flash. That's why meditation exists, to slow down perception until you can see the links one by one. When you breathe slowly, observe clearly, you notice how thoughts form, how they pull sensations into their orbit, how they weave a story. You see anxiety being born right before your eyes, and once you see the birth, you understand its death. Dependent origination is like watching dominoes fall. Each piece knocks down the next, and soon the whole pattern collapses. But if you remove even one piece, the chain stops. That's what mindfulness does. It removes the link between sensation and reaction. The sound still happens, the thought still appears, but the identification ends. Without identification, emotion has no anchor. Without emotion, craving and fear lose fuel. The whole structure falls apart. Think about how often stress begins not in the present but in memory. The mind recalls something unpleasant, and suddenly the body relives it. The past becomes now because thought brings it back to life. But dependent origination explains that memory is just another cause. It's not alive by itself. It needs your attention to continue. When you stop feeding it with belief, the image fades, the emotion cools. The past can't hurt you unless you keep inviting it back. Modern psychology echoes this in cognitive science. Emotion follows perception. Change perception, and emotion shifts. What Buddhism adds is the understanding that perception itself is conditioned, formed by habit, karma, and belief. Every mind sees through its own lens. One person hears criticism, another hears feedback. The sound is the same, but the meaning differs. Real freedom comes not from controlling what happens, but from understanding the mind that perceives it. When you see that causes are empty too, that even they depend on other causes, something profound happens. You realize there is no single villain to defeat, no single thought to erase. Everything is a web, and in that web, every strand affects another. Worry is just the echo of misunderstanding bouncing through that web. Cut one thread of belief, and the echo stops. In practice, this means paying attention to small beginnings. Most people try to fix anxiety when it's already burning, when the body is tense and the heart races. But by then, the chain has gone far. True wisdom acts earlier. It watches the first signs, the tightening in the chest, the slight unease, the restless thought, and responds with awareness, not judgment. That single act changes everything. You don't need to stop the storm. You only need to notice the wind before it grows. The Buddha compared the process to planting seeds. Every thought, every reaction, every intention is a seed. Some grow into peace, others into stress. But the ground they grow in is the same, the mind. If you keep planting fear, the field becomes dense with weeds. If you plant awareness, the weeds can't take root. Over time, mindfulness becomes the gardener that clears the soil of illusion. At its core, dependent origination teaches responsibility, not blame. It says, you are not guilty for stress, but you participate in its creation. The world doesn't inject anxiety into you. Your mind constructs it in relationship with what happens. This is empowering, because what's made can be unmade. If stress arises from causes, peace arises from wisdom. The moment you understand the pattern, you hold the power to change it. The chain of anxiety thrives on ignorance. When you shine awareness on it, ignorance dies, and the links weaken. You can start anywhere. Some people begin by observing contact, what triggers them. Others start with feeling the moment the heart tightens, others with craving the impulse to escape discomfort. Wherever you start, clarity spreads backward and forward. You see that nothing stands alone. And when nothing stands alone, nothing can imprison you. There's a moment in meditation when you catch the birth of a thought. It rises like a bubble from still water, small, delicate. If you simply watch it, it bursts and disappears. But if you chase it, it multiplies into stories, fears, and regrets. Awareness is the needle that pops the bubble before it grows. That's how you cut the chain, not by force, but by understanding. Anxiety often disguises itself as protection. The mind says, "I'm just preparing. I'm being careful." But underneath, it's the same mechanism, a craving for control. You fear uncertainty, so you build scenarios, strategies, predictions. Yet every time you plan against the unknown, you strengthen the illusion of a self that must control everything. And the more control you crave, the more powerless you feel. This is the cruel loop of anxiety, the mind trying to secure what was never meant to be secured. The Buddha called this tanha, thirst. It's the craving that arises after feeling the urge to hold or push away. When you feel something pleasant, you want more. When you feel something painful, you want it gone. Either way, you're caught. But if you observe the feeling without grasping or resisting, the thirst fades. The link breaks, and suffering ends naturally. This is not suppression, it's wisdom. It's seeing that clinging to comfort or escape only feeds the cycle. You can test this in simple ways. When stress arises, notice how quickly the mind says, "I shouldn't feel this." That thought is the second layer of suffering. The first arrow is discomfort, the second arrow is resistance. When you drop resistance, the pain softens immediately. The experience remains, but without the burden of, "I don't want this." You begin to live with openness instead of battle. Over time, this understanding reshapes the nervous system itself. Modern studies show that when you respond to stress with acceptance rather than resistance, your body releases fewer stress hormones. The breath deepens, the heart rate steadies, and the brain rewires toward calm. Awareness literally changes biology. The Buddha saw this centuries before science confirmed it, that liberation begins not with belief, but with observation. Another key link in the chain is upadana, clinging. Once craving arises, the mind holds on. You identify with the emotion, my anxiety, my fear, my stress. But when you say my, you turn a passing feeling into a permanent self. The illusion of ownership keeps the cycle alive. To let go, you must see that emotions belong to nature, not to you. The rain falls, the wind blows, and thoughts arise. None of them belong to anyone. They simply move through experience. As this insight deepens, compassion naturally grows. You stop blaming yourself for feeling anxious. You stop blaming others for triggering you. You see that everyone is caught in their own web of causes and conditions. This understanding creates patience, the kind that says, this too is a process. The same law that gives rise to stress also allows it to end. When causes cease, so does the effect. In daily life, awareness of dependent origination transforms how you respond. When conflict arises, you no longer react blindly. You see the chain forming perception, feeling, reaction, and you pause. You let the process unfold without jumping in. That pause is liberation in disguise. In that single moment, you step out of the cycle of automatic suffering. You start to live deliberately instead of reactively. The more you practice, the earlier you see the causes. You notice how expectations create pressure, how comparing yourself to others breeds insecurity, how wanting things to be different feeds unease. Each insight weakens a link. Each moment of clarity is like removing a knot from a tangled rope. Eventually, the rope unravels, and what was once tight and painful becomes light and free. Understanding dependent origination also reveals the beauty of interconnection. The same principle that creates suffering also creates joy. Just as anxiety arises from causes, so does kindness, love, and peace. When you cultivate generosity, mindfulness, or compassion, you plant causes for serenity. Every small act of awareness is a new seed that changes the landscape of your mind. This is why Buddhism is called the middle path, not because it avoids life, but because it understands balance. Everything depends on everything else. You cannot isolate one part and call it you. When you see that, you stop taking stress personally. You stop thinking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start seeing, "This is how conditions are unfolding." That simple shift turns drama into understanding, chaos into clarity. In truth, the mind itself is a process, not a thing. It's movement, constant and alive. Anxiety is just one of its motions, no more personal than wind passing through a field. When you see it this way, you don't need to escape the mind. You only need to know it. Awareness doesn't destroy thought, it reveals its transparency. The Buddha once said, "When this is, that is. When this ceases, that ceases." These simple words hold the essence of freedom. Stress exists because of its causes, and when the causes end, so does stress. The key is to recognize that no cause is unbreakable. Every chain, no matter how long, has a weakest link. Your task is only to find it through patience, through clarity, through steady awareness. As you rest here, breathing softly, notice how anxiety has no form of its own. It depends on attention. When attention relaxes, the feeling fades. That fading is not failure, it's awakening. It's the proof that what arises by cause can end through understanding. Dependent origination isn't just a teaching, it's the map of your inner world. Every moment, the chain is forming or dissolving. Every breath offers a choice to feed stress or to see through it. The mind can be a prison or a path, depending on what you do with each link. So let this be your quiet practice tonight. See how each sensation connects to the next, how thought becomes feeling, how feeling becomes story, how story becomes burden. Then stop adding fuel. Let the sequence slow until it ends in stillness. That stillness is not empty space, it's the ground of freedom. From ignorance comes confusion, from confusion comes grasping, from grasping comes suffering. But from awareness comes release, from release comes peace, and from peace comes wisdom. This is how the cycle turns. This is how anxiety dies before it begins. Now the mind can rest. The body breathes on its own. The world moves as it always has, but something within you has shifted. You no longer see stress as an enemy or an accident. You see it as a process, one that can end. The chain is clear now, and in its clarity, you find the calm that no condition can shake. You have reached the point where awareness meets truth. Nothing stands alone, and nothing lasts. Anxiety was never yours. It was only a pattern waiting to be seen, and now that you've seen it, it can finally let go. When the chain of causes is seen clearly, the mind begins to rest. Awareness starts to move differently, no longer chasing, no longer reacting. You begin to notice a new kind of quiet, one that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the absence of struggle. The noise of thoughts, the constant commentary, the endless need to respond, all of it begins to fade. This is where silence starts to speak, not as an absence, but as a presence. What comes next is not emptiness, but depth, a silence that heals because it understands. True healing doesn't come from adding more noise, more words, or more action. It comes when you stop feeding the storm inside. Most of life's pain is not in what happens, but in how much we react. Every word we throw into an argument, Every thought we repeat in anger, every story we tell ourselves about what's wrong, they all strengthen the noise. Noble silence, or Arya Tunhibhava, is the art of ending that war. It's not just being quiet, it's being still inside. Silence in Buddhism is not a punishment or a retreat from life. It's a way to listen. The world is filled with voices, people's expectations, your own opinions, the endless hum of information. Beneath that, something waits patiently: awareness itself. Noble silence is the doorway to that awareness. When you stop reacting, you start hearing what was always there. You begin to feel the world directly, without distortion. Reaction is the habit of a restless mind. Someone speaks, and you want to reply. A thought appears, and you chase it. A memory rises, and you relive it. Each reaction pulls you further from the center of stillness. But when you practice silence, you learn to pause. You learn to let experience happen without immediately reaching for defense or approval. In that pause, wisdom grows. Think of how many conversations are filled not with understanding but with the urge to be heard. People talk not to connect, but to escape the discomfort of silence. Yet silence is not empty space, it's the womb of clarity. Every deep truth, every moment of insight arises from stillness. The Buddha taught that speech should come only when it brings benefit. Silence is noble because it protects truth from being diluted by noise. In meditation, noble silence is the moment you stop trying to control the mind. You stop explaining, labeling, fixing. Thoughts still come, but you don't talk back. You don't argue with yourself. You let thoughts rise and fall like waves on the shore. The stillness beneath remains untouched. That stillness is the mind's true nature, silent, luminous, awake. When you begin to live this silence, something changes in how you relate to the world. You stop needing to prove anything. You listen more, and not just with your ears, you listen with your whole being. You feel the vibration of another's words, their fears, their longing, their confusion. You respond less, but you understand more. Because real understanding doesn't come from quick answers, it comes from deep presence. This silence is not withdrawal, it's intimacy with reality. It's the end of the filter between you and life. When you stop reacting, you see things as they are, not as your emotions paint them. Anger becomes just energy moving. Fear becomes tightness releasing. You stop defending yourself because you realize there's nothing to defend. Words become tools, not weapons. You speak when necessary, and your words carry weight because they arise from stillness, not from impulse. In noble silence, the mind heals itself. Every reaction creates friction. Every pause creates space. And in that space, energy that was trapped in fear begins to settle. Stress melts when it no longer has to be expressed. The nervous system finds balance again. The breath deepens naturally. You start to feel like you are breathing not just through the lungs, but through the whole body, every cell, becoming part of the rhythm of peace. The Buddha often spent long periods in silence. His silence was not avoidance, it was teaching without words. The disciples noticed that even without speaking, his presence calmed their hearts. Silence radiates wisdom because it's a reflection of complete understanding. Words divide, but silence unites. When you sit with someone in deep silence, there's a recognition, a sense that you're not two minds, but one awareness meeting itself. In daily life, this teaching becomes even more powerful. When conflict arises, silence can transform everything. Instead of reacting to anger with anger, you pause, you breathe. You let the other person's words echo and fade before you respond. That moment of silence disarms the situation. It turns heat into light. You realize that your silence doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. You are no longer pulled by every emotion that passes through the room, but silence also needs to begin inside. Many people fall quiet on the outside, but remain loud within. The inner voice still argues, defends, blames, analyzes. To practice noble silence is to quiet that inner commentary. You don't suppress it, you observe it until it loses energy. Like a fire running out of fuel, the mind slows when you stop feeding it attention. Then silence becomes effortless. There's a deep relief in this. The mind, used to constant narration, finally rests. You begin to experience what it feels like to be without agenda, not trying to fix the moment, not waiting for the next thought. This is healing. Stress fades because the inner noise that sustained it fades too. Without commentary, life becomes simple. Just breathing, just being, just awareness moving through time. Modern psychology touches on this idea through mindfulness and cognitive quieting. When you observe your thoughts without responding, neural patterns of overthinking weaken. The brain learns that silence is safe. It no longer panics when nothing is happening. In fact, it starts to find pleasure in stillness. This mirrors the Buddhist insight that silence is nourishment for the heart. Silence doesn't mean rejecting sound. It means meeting sound without inner resistance. A car horn, a conversation, a sudden cry, all are part of the same silence when you don't react. The true silence exists underneath noise, not apart from it. When you understand this, you can be silent even in a busy city. The stillness travels with you like a soft presence, untouched by chaos. In relationships, noble silence becomes the ground for real connection. When you stop interrupting others with your need to respond, you start to hear their truth. When you listen without the urge to fix, you create safety. People sense when they are being heard beyond words. That's why silence heals. It gives space for what's real to appear. The discipline of silence also purifies speech. You begin to choose words carefully, not from fear, but from awareness. Before you speak, you feel the intention forming. You ask yourself, is this kind? Is this true? Is this necessary? If not, you let it dissolve. Over time, your words gain strength because they come from quiet understanding, not from emotional reaction. The Buddha described speech as an expression of the mind. To purify words, purify silence first. The silence of a calm mind naturally produces wise speech. This is why great teachers say little but change lives. Their silence carries more truth than the loudest argument. Silence also reveals how much of stress is self-created. When you stop reacting, you see how your opinions, judgments, and labels shape your world. You see that many problems exist only because you keep describing them. The moment you stop giving them language, they lose form. They were stories, not reality. Noble silence ends those stories. As you practice this, daily life becomes softer. You stop rushing to fill every pause. You eat in silence. You walk in silence. You breathe in silence. Each moment becomes full instead of empty. The senses sharpen. The mind feels fresh. Even simple acts, drinking water, touching sunlight, feel sacred. You start to realize that silence isn't something you do. It's what you are when the noise falls away. There's a saying in Zen, when the mouth is silent, the heart speaks. That heart is not emotion, it's awareness. When you stop filling every space with words, that awareness expands naturally. It becomes a quiet joy, subtle but unshakable. You begin to love silence, not as escape, but as presence. It becomes your resting place between thoughts, between breaths, between moments. This is also the ground of wisdom. Every insight arises after silence. You can't think your way to understanding. You must quiet enough to let understanding reveal itself. Noble silence is the space in which intuition blossoms. It's how the mind begins to see without strain. The more you practice, the more you trust that wisdom doesn't need noise, it only needs stillness. Sometimes silence feels uncomfortable because it mirrors the mind back to you. You start hearing your own restlessness, your unspoken fears. This is the purification process. The silence isn't empty. It's showing you everything you've been running from. Stay with it. Breathe through the discomfort. Eventually, the noise reveals its own impermanence. Beneath it, you find peace that cannot be disturbed. This silence also extends to reaction in thought. When a difficult emotion arises, anger, jealousy, guilt, you don't fight it. You hold silence inside. You allow the feeling to unfold without commentary. You notice the sensations in the body, the heat, the tension, the movement. You let them pass through without adding words. This inner silence is the highest form of non-reaction. It's how emotions transform into understanding. The Buddha once said that just as a lake becomes clear when untouched, the mind becomes clear when left alone. Every reaction is like stirring the water. Every silence is like letting it settle. When you stop reacting, clarity returns on its own. You don't have to make it happen. In that clarity, the world looks different. You begin to see how much of human suffering comes from noise, from endless arguments, opinions, judgments. Silence cuts through that fog like morning light. It reveals simplicity. You start to realize that nothing needs to be as complicated as the mind makes it. Life is direct, but the commentary adds weight. Remove the commentary, and you're free. Practicing noble silence also means learning to trust pauses. In conversation, you don't rush to fill every gap. In thought, you don't panic when nothing comes. You let space exist. That space is where truth grows. Every meaningful word, every clear decision is born in the pause. Over time, silence becomes your natural state. You carry it everywhere. People may notice that you speak less but feel more grounded. Your presence starts calming others. Silence is contagious, it spreads peace without effort. You become a mirror where others can rest. Noble silence is not the silence of withdrawal or pride, it's the silence of wisdom and love. It says, I understand that nothing needs to be added to this moment. It's the humility of being fully here. It's the awareness that every sound, every word, every action arises from the same still ground. Even in meditation, silence deepens beyond what words can reach. At first, you hear the body, then the breath, then the mind. But as you sink deeper, even thought becomes distant. Awareness stands alone, vast and quiet. In that space, there is no self, no story, no problem, just silence that is alive, breathing, endless. From this silence, you return to the world refreshed. You speak with care, listen with depth, move with grace. Stress cannot survive where there is no reaction. Worry cannot grow where there is no noise to feed it. The mind becomes a lake of still water, reflecting everything but disturbed by nothing. This silence is not a destination, it's a way of being. You don't chase it, you uncover it. It was always there, beneath the thoughts, beneath the reactions, beneath the noise. Every time you stop reacting, you come home to it again. So as you rest now, let the world be what it is. Let the breath move freely. Let the silence grow inside you until it fills the room. You don't need to understand everything. You only need to stop reacting long enough for truth to reveal itself. In this silence, there is no stress, no noise, no self to protect. There is only peace, deep, wordless, complete. The kind of peace that doesn't come from controlling the world, but from no longer needing to. And when you wake from this stillness, you will not be someone who avoids life. You will be someone who moves through it quietly, wisely, unshaken, a living reflection of the noble silence itself. When silence begins to settle in the heart, a new kind of awareness appears, soft, steady, and alive. You start to notice the delicate rhythm of life moving through everything, yet there's still something the mind struggles with, the tension between trying too hard and not trying at all. Even after tasting stillness, a quiet question lingers inside. How do I live in this world without losing my balance? How do I act without forcing, rest without collapsing, care without controlling? This is where the wisdom of the middle way begins to reveal itself. The middle way is not a path of moderation for its own sake. It's a way of seeing that extremes are prisons. When you cling to control, life feels tight, rigid, suffocating. When you fall into chaos, it feels empty, lost, and drifting. Both create stress, because both resist the natural flow of things. The Buddha discovered this truth after years of self-denial and indulgence, realizing that peace doesn't live at the edges, it lives in the balance between them. The human mind loves extremes. It believes safety is in control and relief is in surrender. But control breeds tension, and surrender without wisdom breeds confusion. The middle way is the art of balancing both, to move with intention but without obsession, to care deeply but without attachment, to live fully but without clinging. This balance dissolves the kind of stress that comes from always pushing or always giving up. Perfectionism is one side of the chain. It comes from fear, the fear of being wrong, of being judged, of losing worth. The mind says, if I do everything right, I'll finally feel safe. But that safety never arrives. The more you control, the more fragile you feel. Because deep down, perfectionism is a battle against reality. Reality changes, people change, results shift. No amount of control can stop impermanence. And yet, the heart keeps trying, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. Letting go doesn't mean being careless. It means understanding that control was never real. You can guide, you can plan, you can act wisely, but you cannot control outcomes. You can plant the seed, but you can't command the rain. You can speak truthfully, but you can't decide how others will receive it. The middle way teaches that freedom is not found in making everything certain. It's found in doing your best and letting the rest unfold. There's a deep peace that comes from this understanding. When you release the burden of control, energy returns to the present moment. You start noticing life as it is, not as you want it to be. You start feeling gratitude for small things again, a breath that moves easily, a task completed without rush, a pause between words. Effort and ease stop being opposites. They become partners. To walk the middle way, you must first see how the mind swings between extremes. One day, it's driven planning, fixing, correcting. The next day, it's exhausted, procrastinating, avoiding, escaping. This pendulum of effort and avoidance creates inner turbulence. The Buddha called this the cycle of craving and aversion. Craving says, I must make it happen. Aversion says, I want to disappear. The middle way says, I will act wisely and rest when it's time. When you begin to apply this in daily life, even simple actions change. Working becomes meditation. Resting becomes rejuvenation, not guilt. You begin to act without pushing against yourself. It's like the breath, it expands and contracts naturally. You don't need to force it to happen. You only need to let it follow its rhythm. The same applies to effort. You apply it where needed and release it when the moment passes. Modern stress often comes from confusing discipline with control. True discipline is alive, it adapts. Control is rigid, it breaks. A disciplined mind acts from clarity, not fear. It knows when to move and when to pause. That's why the middle way is not weakness, it's intelligence. It's the wisdom that sees that forcing life only creates resistance, while abandoning effort creates decay. Balance is not static, it's the constant dance between both sides. This path also frees you from comparison. When you live at the extremes, you measure yourself against others constantly. You feel behind, less than, or superior. But balance has no competition. It asks only that you live in alignment with your own rhythm. You start to realize that perfection is not in flawless results, but in harmony when body, mind, and action move as one. The middle way also transforms how you handle emotions. Control tries to suppress them. Chaos drowns in them. Balance allows them to flow. When anger arises, you neither act it out nor bury it. You breathe, you feel, and you let it pass. The emotion becomes a wave, not a trap. This is how peace begins to live inside, even while the world remains uncertain. In the teachings, the Buddha described the middle way as the path that leads to wisdom, not through theories, but through experience. It's how he overcame the suffering that came from both indulgence and deprivation. You can see this principle everywhere in nature, in breath, in seasons. The tree bends with the wind. If it refuses, it breaks. The river moves around rocks. If it fought them, it would cease to flow. Every living thing follows the law of balance, except the human mind, which keeps trying to control the river. So how do you find this balance in your life? Start by observing the tension between doing and being. Notice when you're forcing outcomes, when the shoulders tighten, when the breath becomes shallow, when the mind races to fix everything. Then pause. Ask yourself, what if I didn't control this moment? What if I just met it with presence? That question alone can dissolve half of your stress. Because what you're really craving isn't control, it's peace. The next step is understanding surrender correctly. Many mistake surrender for weakness or apathy, but in truth, surrender is the highest form of strength. It's choosing to let life move through you instead of resisting it. It's knowing that doing your best is enough. It's releasing attachment to results, not effort itself. When you surrender like this, you act with clarity, not with desperation. You become an instrument of harmony, not of struggle. Think of moments when you acted from calm understanding instead of panic. You still worked, spoke, and decided, but the energy was different. There was grace in it. That's the middle way in action. It's when your effort is guided by awareness, not driven by fear. You can feel the difference in your body. One contracts, the other expands. The Buddha compared the practice of balance to tuning a musical instrument. If the string is too tight, it breaks. If it's too loose, it makes no sound. Only when it's tuned just right does it produce music. Your mind works the same way. Too much control creates strain. Too much passivity leads to dullness. But when effort and surrender meet, life plays in harmony. This principle applies even in relationships. Control tries to shape people into your expectations. Chaos avoids intimacy altogether. The middle way loves with wisdom. It listens, understands, and gives space for others to be as they are. You learn to guide without forcing, to care without clinging, and in that space, real connection grows. Perfectionism often hides the fear of losing love. The mind says, if I'm flawless, no one will reject me. But the middle way teaches that love doesn't come from performance, it comes from presence. The more you let go of proving yourself, the more authentic your relationships become. People feel safer around you because your peace doesn't depend on their approval. Even in spiritual practice, extremes can trap you. Some people force meditation as if trying to conquer the mind. Others drift into laziness, waiting for peace to appear without effort. The Buddha warned against both. Real practice happens in the middle, steady, gentle, consistent. You show up each day not to achieve enlightenment, but to meet the mind where it is. You learn to trust the process, not the timeline. As awareness matures, you start noticing that the same balance applies to thought itself. Control tries to stop thinking. Chaos lets thoughts run wild. Balance observes them without judgment. You neither chase nor reject them. You see that thoughts are just movements of energy. When you stop fighting them, they pass. That's the power of the middle. It allows everything to move through without leaving residue. This understanding also changes how you pursue goals. The world teaches you to push harder, to grind endlessly, to define worth by achievement. But the middle way teaches alignment instead of struggle. It asks, what if you worked with life, not against it? What if success came from harmony, not exhaustion? When you act from balance, creativity flows naturally. You're more efficient because you're not wasting energy on resistance. Modern neuroscience supports this too. When the mind relaxes but stays alert, it enters a state called flow. It's when musicians lose themselves in music, athletes in motion, writers in words. In that state, there's effort without effort, awareness guiding action. This is the modern reflection of the middle way. It's not mystical, it's natural. It's how the brain functions best when freed from stress. The deeper you walk this path, the more you realize that balance is not something to achieve, it's something to remember. You were born balanced. Watch a child play full of energy, yet unburdened by perfection. They fall, laugh, and continue. The mind later forgets this wisdom, burdened by fear and expectation. The middle way is simply the art of remembering what you once knew how to move with life, not against it. This way of being also transforms how you face uncertainty. Control fears the unknown, chaos hides from it. Balance steps forward with curiosity. It trusts that not knowing is not danger, it's possibility. When you stop demanding certainty, life opens. You stop rehearsing disasters in your head. You start responding to reality as it unfolds, instead of reacting to what you imagine. That's when anxiety loses its power. To live this way doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It means your relationship with it changes. You stop swinging between overdoing and giving up. You stop chasing happiness and start embodying contentment. The middle way brings the kind of strength that looks effortless from the outside because it flows from understanding, not from struggle. This balance is also reflected in nature's rhythm, the balance between day and night, work and rest, giving and receiving. When humans move against this rhythm, stress increases. When we align with it, harmony returns. Even your breath is teaching this. Inhale effort, exhale surrender. Each cycle is a lesson in balance, repeated thousands of times a day. In every moment of stress, the path back to peace is the same. Notice which extreme has taken hold. Are you forcing or are you avoiding? Then take one step toward the center. That single movement can change everything. Because the middle way is not a destination far away, it's one breath away, one mindful choice away. Over time, balance becomes instinctive. You stop looking for formulas and start listening to life itself. You begin to sense when to act and when to rest, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to hold on and when to release. That sensitivity is the wisdom of the middle way. It makes you gentle without being weak, strong without being harsh. Stress cannot survive in this state because stress is born from friction, from resisting the natural flow. When effort and surrender move together, friction disappears. You still work, still feel, still live fully, but without heaviness. The body feels lighter, the mind clearer, the heart calmer. You discover that balance is not about controlling life, but being in tune with it. The Buddha described this harmony as the end of extremes, the point where the path of liberation begins. To live it is to walk the line between heaven and earth, engaged, awake, and free. You become like the tree that bends but never breaks, like the river that flows but never resists. So, as you rest now, let this teaching settle in your breath. Let it move quietly through your body like water finding its level. You don't have to fight for balance. It's already within you. All you need is to stop leaning too far in any direction. When you find that quiet space between control and chaos, you discover a freedom that doesn't depend on outcomes. It's the peace of knowing that nothing needs to be forced and nothing needs to be avoided. Effort and ease become one motion, the rhythm of life itself. And in that rhythm, you no longer live in tension, you live in flow. You act with clarity, rest with trust, and walk through the world not as someone struggling to stay upright, but as someone who has finally remembered how to move with the middle path, steady, balanced, unshakably at peace. When balance becomes natural, something deeper begins to unfold. The mind starts to see that even in perfect equilibrium, there is still a subtle sense of I, holding the balance, the quiet belief that there is someone doing, someone choosing, someone trying to stay centered. That small presence feels harmless, even comforting, yet it is the root of every remaining tension. Beneath control and chaos lies the final illusion, the idea that there is a me at the center of it all. The teaching of non-identification begins here, the key that opens the final gate of freedom. Most of the suffering you experience doesn't come from what happens, but from what you believe yourself to be within it. You say, I'm angry, I'm anxious, I'm failing, I'm broken. Each phrase wraps the mind tighter around emotion and thought, turning passing clouds into a personal storm. The Buddha's insight into anatta, non-self, is not a denial of existence, it's a revelation of freedom. It shows that you are not the thought, not the feeling, not the story that rises and fades. When you truly see this, inner drama collapses, and what's left is stillness that can't be disturbed. The habit of identification runs deep. From childhood, you were taught to name everything as mine, my body, my name, my emotions, my achievements. But if you look closely, none of these things stay. The body changes every moment. The mind changes even faster. The me you were 10 years ago doesn't exist now, yet you keep holding on to a picture of yourself as fixed, solid, continuous. That illusion creates fear, because anything that threatens the image feels like death. The truth is simpler. There is no permanent owner inside. There are experiences, yes, but no one who owns them. When anger rises, you say, I am angry. But look at the process carefully. The anger arises by itself. You don't choose it. It grows, burns, and fades on its own. When it's gone, where is the I who owned it? The body remains, awareness remains, but the emotion passes. The phrase, "This is not me, not mine," is not a rejection, it's recognition. It's seeing things as they truly are, events in awareness, not personal possessions. To understand this deeply, start observing thoughts without claiming them. When a thought appears, notice how quickly the mind says, I thought that. Yet the thought appeared before you noticed it. It wasn't yours. It was a movement in consciousness, like a breeze moving through the trees. You don't say, my wind is blowing. You just feel it. The same applies to thoughts. They happen. You witness. That witnessing, silent, unshaken, is closer to your true nature than any thought about yourself. This realization doesn't make you detached in a cold way. It makes you free in a compassionate way. When you stop taking emotions personally, you stop fighting them. Sadness can be there, anger can be there, but they are no longer marks of failure. They are simply waves passing through awareness. You start to meet each emotion with kindness, because you no longer confuse feeling pain with being pain. Non-identification doesn't mean denial. You still experience life fully: laughter, grief, joy, loss, but without clinging to the sense of mine. You still act, speak, love, create, but there's space inside those actions. There's no longer the tightness of I must win, I must protect, I must prove. You act because action is natural, not because it defines who you are. This shift is the quiet liberation the Buddha pointed to: freedom in the midst of ordinary life. Consider how stress begins. Something happens, a thought appears, and then the mind says, "This affects me." The identification turns experience into ownership. The event becomes personal, and pain follows. But when you meet experience with awareness instead of identification, the link breaks. You see that the event is simply happening in consciousness, not to an owner. You can respond wisely without getting entangled. This insight can be applied even to the body. The body is often the strongest point of identification. You call it me. But look closer. The body changes without your permission: breath, heartbeat, digestion, aging, healing. It follows its own laws. If you were the body, you would control every process, but you don't. The body belongs to nature, not to you. When this is seen, fear of death begins to fade. Death is not the end of a person, it's the continuation of natural change. The body returns to earth, awareness remains timeless. When you live identified with the body or the mind, you're always under threat. Illness, aging, rejection all become attacks on the self. But when you see that there is no fixed self, these experiences lose their sting. Pain can still appear, but suffering, the mental resistance, weakens. The Buddha called this freedom from I-making and mine-making. It's the end of carrying the world on your shoulders. The practical way to cultivate this is through deep mindfulness. Watch how the mind creates identity moment by moment. A thought appears. I'm tired. Pause. Who is tired? The body feels fatigue. The mind notices it, but is there truly a me that owns the tiredness? When you look directly, the ownership dissolves. The experience remains, but without the label. It's just tiredness moving through awareness. At first, this may feel strange, even unsettling. The ego resists non-identification because it believes it's being erased. But in truth, it's being liberated. What dies is only the false idea of control. What remains is something vast, the space that can hold everything without being affected by it. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "In seeing, only seeing. In hearing, only hearing." Life happens through you, not to you. In modern psychology, this insight aligns with the idea of cognitive diffusion, the ability to separate from thoughts instead of being absorbed by them. Studies show that people who practice this experience lower anxiety because they no longer treat every thought as truth. Buddhism discovered this thousands of years ago. The moment you see thought as an object, not identity, its power dissolves. The mind's habit of identification is ancient. It evolved to protect the body, to create a self that could survive. But now, that same instinct causes emotional pain. When someone criticizes you, it feels like an attack on your existence. Yet words are only sound vibrations. They can't touch your true nature. What hurts is the idea that those words define you. When that idea is seen through, criticism loses its bite. Praise loses its hold too. You become steady, not arrogant, but grounded in reality. Freedom from identification also transforms relationships. Most conflict arises because people defend the image of themselves. One person says something that touches another's ego, and reaction explodes. But when you stop identifying with that image, you stop needing to defend it. You listen more deeply, speak more gently, and respond from wisdom rather than pride. This doesn't make you passive, It makes you peaceful. You act when needed, but without aggression or fear. In spiritual practice, this insight deepens meditation. When you stop identifying with thoughts, meditation ceases to be a struggle. You don't try to silence the mind. You let it move as it wants, knowing it's not you. Thoughts pass, sensations shift, awareness remains. Over time, this distinction becomes clear. Awareness is constant. Everything else changes. You realize that your true nature is the witnessing itself, not what's witnessed. The Buddha described this as the difference between the flame and the fuel. The self is the fuel that keeps the fire of suffering burning. When you stop feeding identity into every thought, the flame fades. Awareness doesn't burn out. It shines clearer than ever. It's pure consciousness, open, luminous, free from grasping. Even pain becomes different under this understanding. When physical or emotional discomfort arises, instead of saying, "I am in pain," say, "Pain is present." This small shift changes everything. You no longer collapse into suffering, you witness it. The body might hurt, but the mind remains at peace. This is not denial, it's clarity. You acknowledge the reality of pain without losing your freedom to see beyond it. Non-identification also frees creativity. When the self loosens, expression flows. You're no longer trapped by fear of judgment or need for perfection. You create because it's natural to express, not because you want to prove something. This freedom brings freshness to everything you do. Work, art, relationships, even simple acts like cooking or walking. You become a channel for life, not the author of it. In everyday stress, you can practice this by noticing when I appears in thought. I'm so stressed, I can't handle this. I'm not good enough. When those thoughts come, gently question them. Who is the I that can't handle this? Where is it located? In the body? In thought? Can you find it? The more you look, the more it dissolves. You find sensations, ideas, memories, but no fixed self. Seeing this again and again weakens the illusion. This insight is also the root of compassion. When the walls of self loosen, you start feeling the world's pain as your own, but without drowning in it. You understand that others act out of their own conditioning, just as you do. Forgiveness becomes natural. You see anger in others as the same energy that once burned in you. You stop judging because you see that no one is truly in control of their conditioning. Everyone is learning, everyone is unfolding. The phrase, "not me, not mine," doesn't remove love, it purifies it. Love without ownership is the highest form of connection. When you love without needing to possess, you allow others to be free. When you help without expecting gratitude, your actions become pure. This is the compassion of the awakened heart, love without me and you, just love flowing through awareness. This freedom also changes how you experience success and failure. When you identify with achievements, success inflates the ego and failure crushes it. But when you see both as passing experiences, neither defines you. You still strive, still act, but with lightness. Winning or losing doesn't disturb your peace, because you know the self that craves approval was never real. In daily mindfulness, you can bring this teaching to every action. Eating, walking, working, all become opportunities to notice the absence of ownership. When the mind says, "I am doing this," look closer. Action happens through intention, through body and mind. But can you find a doer separate from the doing? When this insight dawns, life becomes spontaneous. The effort to control disappears, replaced by effortless responsiveness. This is also the beginning of true humility. When you no longer identify with knowledge or virtue, you stop needing to be superior. You can learn from anyone. You can admit mistakes easily, because mistakes no longer threaten identity. That's why awakened beings seem both powerful and humble. They act with complete freedom, but carry no pride. Even in silence, the insight of non-identification deepens. The quiet mind becomes a mirror, reflecting everything without clinging to reflection. Thoughts, sensations, sounds all arise, all pass. The mirror doesn't choose or reject, it simply reflects. That's awareness. You are that mirror, not the images passing across it. When identification dissolves completely, what remains is simplicity. You still live, still feel, still act, but the burden of I is gone. Life flows effortlessly, like water following gravity. Stress loses its foundation, because stress was always tied to ownership. Without my pain, my problem, my story, there's only experience, fresh, free, alive. The Buddha once said, "In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, only the heard." He was pointing to this direct experience awareness before identity. To live from this place is to live beyond fear. Death, loss, and change no longer terrify, because there's no fixed self to lose. Life becomes a continuous unfolding, like waves arising and fading on the surface of an endless ocean. So as you rest now, let these words settle softly. Notice how thoughts appear, how sensations move, how awareness simply observes. Let each thought whisper and pass without grabbing it. You don't need to push anything away or hold anything close. Just see that everything is moving through you, but none of it is you. This is not detachment, it's awakening. It's the moment when you finally realize that you were never the voice in your head, never the roles you played, never the pain you carried. You are the space in which it all appeared untouched, limitless, aware. And when you know this, not just in thought but in your bones, life stops being a performance and becomes a meditation. Every step, every breath, every moment becomes light. Nothing owns you, and you own nothing. There is only awareness resting in itself, free, open, silent. This is not me, this is not mine. Say it, softly within, not as rejection, but as truth. Each time you see through identification, the world becomes lighter. You begin to live as awareness itself, the one that was always here, watching the waves rise and fall, never drowning, never clinging, forever free. When identification falls away, the mind becomes light. Thoughts still come, feelings still rise, but they no longer stick. There's a quiet spaciousness that holds everything, and yet, even in that freedom, life continues to touch you. Pain still visits, loss still occurs, the body still feels, the heart still moves. Freedom does not mean you stop experiencing life. It means you stop turning pain into endless suffering. This is where the teaching of the second arrow begins, a truth so subtle that most people miss it their whole lives. The Buddha once described it this way: when struck by an arrow, the body feels pain. But most people do not stop there. They shoot themselves with a second arrow, the arrow of resistance. The first arrow is inevitable. It belongs to the nature of life. The second arrow is optional, but it's the one that causes the most suffering. Every time you say, "This shouldn't be happening," you fire another arrow. Every time you replay the past or anticipate the future, you twist the wound deeper. Freedom comes when you finally stop shooting. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is a sensation, raw, direct, part of being alive. Suffering is what the mind adds to it, the story, the blame, the fear, the comparison. The first arrow pierces the body or the heart. The second pierces the mind. The second arrow says, "Why me? This isn't fair. It will never end." It's the voice of resistance trying to make the world fit its expectations. And yet, no thought has ever changed what has already happened. The struggle only multiplies what you feel. To understand this deeply, begin by seeing how often you resist what is. The traffic jam, the rude comment, the pain in your back, the memory of loss each time you push against the moment, tension appears. The body tightens, the breath shortens, the mind hardens. That tension is the second arrow. Awareness doesn't ask you to like pain, it asks you to stop adding to it, to let the first arrow be what it is, without creating another. Most people live their whole lives firing arrows at shadows, arguing with reality, trying to control what cannot be controlled. But pain is not the enemy. The Buddha never promised a life without discomfort. He offered the path to peace within it. When you meet pain with awareness, you discover that it can exist without destroying your peace. The body may ache, the heart may ache, but the awareness behind them remains untouched. That awareness is the space where healing begins. This understanding doesn't mean you become passive. It means you stop fighting what's already true. If there is pain, acknowledge it. Feel it directly without the commentary. The mind will want to explain it, justify it, fix it. That's the reflex of the second arrow. But if you stay with the raw experience, the pressure, the heat, the vibration, you'll notice something surprising. Sensations move, they rise, peak, and pass. It's only the thought that says, "I can't bear this," that makes them stay. Every emotion, every discomfort follows this pattern. It arises, it lives, it fades. The problem is not the feeling itself, but our unwillingness to let it complete its natural cycle. We interrupt it with resistance, which traps it in the mind. The second arrow freezes what was meant to flow. Awareness, on the other hand, melts the freeze. It allows pain to move through and leave quietly, without scars. This teaching is not abstract, it's deeply practical. Think of moments when you've been hurt by someone's words. The words are the first arrow, they exist for a few seconds. But the thoughts that follow, replaying them, analyzing them, carrying them into tomorrow, those are the second arrows. Each repetition renews the wound. The pain becomes suffering because you keep reviving it in thought. When you see this clearly, you realize how much of what hurts is not happening now, it's happening in memory. Awareness breaks that cycle. The moment you notice the mind replaying pain, you're already free. You've stepped out of the story and into observation. The watcher doesn't suffer, only the identified mind does. Watching thought without believing it is like stepping out of the rain. The storm continues, but you're under shelter. This is how awareness ends the second arrow. It doesn't erase pain, it reveals its impermanence. Even physical pain changes under this view. When you stop labeling it as mine, it becomes pure sensation. You start noticing its texture, pulsing, warmth, pressure. You see that it moves, that it breathes. Pain ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. It shows you where you hold tension, where you resist. The more you observe without judgment, the less you suffer. The first arrow stays sharp, but the second arrow never lands. This is not denial or numbness. It's sensitivity without suffering. When you stop resisting, you become more alive, not less. You feel everything: joy, sadness, pleasure, loss, but none of it imprisons you. You become open to the full range of human experience, knowing that nothing can truly harm awareness itself. That is why awakened beings radiate peace. Even in pain, they have dropped the second arrow completely. The mind often believes that resistance protects you. It says, "If I worry, I'll be prepared," or "If I stay angry, I'll stay strong." But resistance doesn't protect, it constricts, it tightens the very thing you want to release. Awareness works differently. It opens, it allows space for the pain to exist without defining you. That space itself is healing. To live this teaching, you start by catching small moments. Notice when irritation appears, the sound you dislike, the delay you didn't expect. Watch how quickly the mind says, "This shouldn't be happening." That phrase is the spark of the second arrow. If you see it, you can stop. You can take one conscious breath and let the feeling be what it is. You don't need to correct the world. You just need to stop shooting yourself. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You start to see pain as weather. The rain falls, the wind blows. But you don't take it personally. You don't blame the sky for being cloudy. In the same way, you stop blaming yourself for feeling pain. It's just part of existence. The wise response is to shelter in awareness, not to curse the storm. There's also the second arrow of guilt, the habit of judging yourself for suffering. You feel pain, then add, "I shouldn't feel this way." That judgment is another layer of resistance. It's the mind's way of avoiding vulnerability. But healing begins when you allow yourself to feel without adding shame. The moment you permit your own humanity, compassion enters. The heart softens, and pain loses its poison. In relationships, this understanding brings peace. When someone you love disappoints you, the hurt is natural, it's the first arrow. But if you cling to resentment, replaying every word, building cases in your head, that's the second. It doesn't heal you, it traps you. Forgiveness, in the Buddhist sense, is not excusing behavior but ending your own suffering. It's laying down the weapon you aimed at yourself. You forgive not to free others, but to stop wounding your own heart. Even in loss, this insight shines. Grief is real. It's the body and heart responding to change. But the story we tell around loss, "I can't live without them. It will never get better," that's the second arrow. When you allow grief to flow without attaching a story, it moves through you like a tide. It cleanses instead of drowning. This is how awareness transforms sorrow into wisdom. Every second arrow begins with the phrase, "This should not be." The mind wants life to obey its preferences, but awareness knows life doesn't work that way. Things change, pain happens, and nothing stays fixed. When you align with this truth, resistance fades. You stop fighting impermanence and start moving with it. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you intelligent. You act to relieve pain where possible, but you don't create extra suffering over what can't be changed. The Buddha called this freedom the end of dukkha, the cycle of unnecessary pain. Awareness becomes your protection, not control. You can meet any situation, pleasant or unpleasant, with the same inner stability. When joy arises, you enjoy it fully, knowing it will pass. When pain arises, you feel it honestly, knowing it too will pass. You stop clinging to pleasure and fearing discomfort, the two arrows that define most of human life. Science even echoes this wisdom. Studies on mindfulness show that when people experience pain with acceptance rather than resistance, the brain's pain centers activate less intensely. The mind literally feels less pain when it stops adding judgment. The second arrow is measurable, and so is its absence. Acceptance is not weakness, it's neurobiological wisdom. Awareness also reveals that sometimes the second arrow hides inside the first. You may think the pain is physical, but the deeper suffering comes from meaning. A sore body becomes, "I'm getting old." A rejection becomes, "I'm unworthy." The second arrow disguises itself as truth. But when you strip away the meaning, what remains is just sensation, neutral, fleeting, alive. Seeing this breaks the illusion of permanence that suffering depends on. Practicing this awareness in small things strengthens you for bigger ones. When you burn your tongue, when plans fail, when someone ignores you, these are moments to train. You can feel the first arrow and let it go before the second appears. Over time, the mind learns that peace doesn't depend on conditions, it depends on perception. Pain can exist, but suffering doesn't have to. This also changes how you help others. When you see people in pain, you no longer rush to fix them, you sit with them. You hold space without adding your own second arrow of worry or guilt. True compassion doesn't resist another's pain. It witnesses it with tenderness. That presence itself is medicine. In the deepest sense, letting go of the second arrow is about trusting life. Trusting that you can meet each moment as it comes, without control, without fear. It's remembering that awareness itself is never harmed. You've already survived countless arrows, heartbreak, illness, disappointment, and yet awareness is still here, untouched. That realization gives courage. Even death, the ultimate first arrow, loses its terror when you see this clearly. The body feels pain, the heart feels fear, but awareness remains untouched. The second arrow of panic, of clinging, can be released even in that moment. Many Buddhist masters died smiling, not because death was easy, but because they stopped resisting what is. The end of resistance is the end of fear. To live without the second arrow is to live gently. You still feel everything, but you don't carry it. Pain visits, you welcome it and let it leave. Joy visits, you welcome it and let it leave. The heart stays open, the mind stays free. This is the true meaning of equanimity balance, born not from control, but from surrender. You can begin right now. Notice any discomfort in your body or emotion in your heart. Instead of trying to fix it, say quietly, "This is the first arrow." Then look for the second, the thoughts, the judgments, the stories. See if you can let them drop. Stay with pure awareness. The moment you do, the burden lightens. In this space, life becomes simple again. Pain, pleasure, loss, gain all flow through like waves across a still sea. The sea doesn't reject the waves, it holds them all. You are that sea. Awareness has always been vast enough to hold every arrow without breaking. The practice is to remember it. So, as you rest now, let the breath carry away resistance. Let the body soften around discomfort. Let thought settle without feeding it. There's nothing to fix, nothing to fear. Pain is part of life. Suffering is not. The first arrow will come and go, but the second arrow is in your hands. You can choose to put it down, and when you do, a new kind of peace fills the heart, not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of understanding. The mind becomes spacious, the body lighter, and life flows, as it always has, full of change, yet free from the sting of resistance. You wake up to a truth so simple it feels like a secret. Pain is real, but suffering was always optional. When you stop firing the second arrow, something inside you grows quiet. Awareness begins to settle like dust after a storm, and you start to sense a stillness that has always been there, untouched by pain, untouched by reaction. This stillness is not emptiness, it's clarity. Yet life does not stop testing you. The world continues to shift, people change, plans fail, and emotions rise like tides. In this constant movement, one question remains: how can you stay steady when everything else sways? The answer lies in equanimity, the art of calm amid chaos, the strength that doesn't need to fight to be strong. Equanimity, or upekkha, is often misunderstood. People think it means not caring, shutting down, becoming cold or distant. But true equanimity is not numbness. It's warmth without attachment, compassion without panic, understanding without control. It's the calm at the center of the storm, not because the storm stopped, but because you finally understood the sky was never broken by the wind. To live with equanimity means you stop being tossed by every emotion that passes through you. The heart feels everything: joy, sorrow, anger, love, but it no longer loses its balance. It holds each experience like a mother holding a child, fully present, fully loving, but not lost in it. This is not detachment from life, it is intimacy with life without drowning in it. The mind without equanimity is like a pendulum. One moment it swings toward pleasure, craving, excitement, obsession. The next, it swings toward pain, aversion, fear, despair. The constant swinging creates fatigue, confusion, and stress. Equanimity is the still point between those extremes. It's the ability to see both sides without being caught in either. When you rest there, you discover a peace that no external condition can disturb. The Buddha described equanimity as one of the highest perfections, not because it removes emotion, but because it purifies it. When your mind is even, love becomes unconditional, wisdom becomes clear, and compassion becomes steady. Without equanimity, kindness burns out and wisdom turns to judgment. With it, everything you do carries the flavor of peace. Equanimity begins with understanding impermanence. When you truly see that everything changes, success, failure, praise, blame, gain, loss, you stop grasping at what cannot be held. You stop collapsing when things don't go your way. The world remains the same, but your relationship to it changes. You no longer depend on outcomes for peace. That is radical freedom, not the kind that separates you from life, but the kind that allows you to move through it without being enslaved by it. Most people live in reaction to pleasure and pain. When something feels good, they chase it. When something feels bad, they run. The constant running creates exhaustion. Equanimity ends this chase. It teaches you to meet each moment as it is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and to respond with clarity instead of reflex. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you wise. You still act, but your actions come from balance, not from craving or fear. To cultivate equanimity, begin by observing your reactions. Notice how quickly the mind labels everything good, bad, mine, not mine. Those labels are the roots of imbalance. When you strip them away, what's left is raw experience, sensations, colors, sounds, feelings, all changing, all flowing. The mind that sees clearly no longer needs to grab or push away. It simply watches. This watching is not indifference, it's presence without interference. In practice, equanimity feels like space. When something triggers you, there's a pause before reaction. In that pause, wisdom can speak. You start to see that emotion itself is not a problem, identification with it is. Anger, sadness, joy, excitement, they're all waves on the surface of awareness. Equanimity is remembering that you are the ocean beneath those waves. This understanding changes how you face difficulty. When things go wrong, the ordinary mind contracts, it blames, resists, or collapses. The equanimous mind opens. It allows discomfort to be there without turning it into identity. It asks, "What is this showing me?" rather than, "Why me?" From that openness, insight arises naturally. You begin to see problems not as punishments, but as teachers. Equanimity also transforms success. Without it, success inflates the ego. You start clinging to praise and fearing loss. But when you hold achievements lightly, you can enjoy them without becoming their prisoner. You know they will pass, as all things do. Gratitude replaces attachment. You celebrate without needing to own the moment. In relationships, equanimity becomes the foundation of real love. Most love is built on conditions. I love you because you make me feel good. But when the feeling fades or expectations break, conflict begins. Equanimity allows you to love without conditions. You care deeply, but you don't demand that life or people fit your desires. You let others be who they are, and in that freedom, connection deepens. Love stops being a contract and becomes a gift. Equanimity also protects compassion. Without it, compassion can become heavy. You absorb everyone's pain and start to drown in empathy fatigue. But when compassion is supported by balance, You can feel others suffering without being consumed by it. You act with kindness, not despair. The heart stays open, but the mind stays steady. This is how healers, teachers, and caregivers sustain their light without burning out their love with equanimity. The practice of equanimity starts small. It begins with awareness of your body and mind throughout the day. When discomfort arises, a headache, a delay, a harsh word, notice it and breathe. Say quietly, "This too is part of life." When pleasure arises, a compliment, a success, a warm breeze, notice it too. Say, "This too will pass." In both cases, stay centered. You don't have to suppress joy or deny pain. You simply meet both with the same understanding heart. Over time, you start seeing that everything is passing through. The pain you felt yesterday is gone. The joy you felt last week has faded. And yet, awareness remains the same. You begin to trust that your true nature is not the changing experiences, but the stillness that knows them. That realization is the root of equanimity, knowing you can meet life fully without losing yourself in it. The mind will test this constantly. It will try to pull you into reaction. Someone criticizes you, and anger rises. Someone praises you, and pride arises. Each time the mind whispers, "This matters more than peace." Equanimity answers, "It matters, but it will pass." This response doesn't make you careless, it makes you free. You still engage, but you don't surrender your inner stability. There's a beauty in this balance. It's the same grace you see in nature. The tree bends with the wind, but doesn't uproot. The river flows around rocks without losing direction. Equanimity is that same intelligence, flexible, grounded, unbreakable. When life pushes, you don't resist, you yield just enough to stay whole. Developing this quality requires patience. The mind has spent years chasing and avoiding. At first, it feels unnatural to let things be. But every moment you practice, the balance strengthens. You start catching yourself earlier before anger explodes, before fear spirals, before excitement turns to obsession. Each pause becomes a doorway to freedom. Equanimity is also deeply connected to wisdom. When you stop reacting blindly, you start seeing causes and effects clearly. You understand why things happen, how they unfold, and how to respond without adding more suffering. You stop taking things personally. When someone acts unkindly, you see their behavior as a product of their own conditioning, not as an attack on your worth. This understanding turns anger into compassion and confusion into insight. The Buddha called this the peace that cannot be shaken. It's not a fragile calm that depends on circumstances. It's an unbreakable steadiness that grows from deep understanding. You can walk through fire and stay cool inside because your peace is no longer borrowed from the world, it's born from wisdom. This kind of calm doesn't mean you feel nothing. You still care, still act, still dream, but you do it with lightness. You stop carrying the weight of outcomes. You learn to move like the wind touching everything, clinging to nothing. That's why equanimity is described as the highest strength. It's the power that comes from non-resistance. In meditation, you can touch this state directly. As thoughts arise, don't chase or reject them. Let them come and go, like clouds passing through open sky. The sky doesn't prefer sunshine or rain, it holds both. Awareness does the same. The more you rest in that spaciousness, the more natural equanimity becomes. It's not something you create, it's what remains when reactivity ends. In daily life, equanimity gives clarity where emotion once ruled. When faced with difficult decisions, you no longer act from fear or desire, you act from understanding. You weigh the situation, sense what is right, and move forward without the anxiety of what if. You do your part and let life handle the rest. This way of living brings quiet confidence, not arrogance, but trust in awareness itself. Even when the world seems chaotic, when news, politics, or personal crises surround you, equanimity keeps you anchored. You stay informed but not consumed, engaged but not overwhelmed. You can care about change without losing sleep over what's beyond your control. This balance makes your compassion effective. Panic never changed the world, but calm understanding has transformed it many times. Equanimity is also the antidote to despair. When things fall apart, the reactive mind collapses. It says, everything is lost. But equanimity sees beyond the current moment. It knows that everything changes, that night turns to dawn, that loss becomes wisdom, that endings are beginnings in disguise. This vision doesn't erase pain, it gives it meaning. It reminds you that no state, pleasant or painful, is final. To live with equanimity is to live in alignment with truth. You stop fighting impermanence and start dancing with it. You stop demanding that life feel a certain way and start meeting it as it is. Each moment becomes sacred because it's fleeting and because you're fully awake to it. This understanding brings deep joy, not the excitement that comes and goes, but the joy of serenity. It's the quiet happiness of knowing that nothing can truly disturb your heart. Even when emotions rise, you see them as part of the human play, not as proof of failure. The calm beneath remains steady, like the still water beneath waves. Equanimity also reconnects you to purpose. When your mind is calm, your actions become clear. You stop wasting energy on reaction and channel it into wisdom and love. You can face challenges with patience and respond to life with creativity. Balance doesn't make you less alive, it makes you fully alive, because energy once lost in worry now fuels clarity and compassion. Over time, this becomes your natural state. The mind no longer rushes to fix every discomfort or cling to every pleasure. It learns to rest in awareness, trusting the flow. The heart remains open and the world feels lighter. This is not the peace of detachment, but of deep connection, the understanding that everything arises and fades within the vastness of awareness, and that awareness itself is never disturbed. So, as you rest here, let this truth sink in. The world may swirl with noise, but you can remain centered. The body may feel, the mind may move, but awareness stays still. This is not escape, it's mastery, the kind that comes from understanding, not control. Let the breath steady, let the thoughts pass, let sensations rise and fall. You don't need to fix, hold, or fear them. You are the space that allows them to be. That space is equanimity, the calm amid chaos, the strength that neither clings nor resists, the peace that needs nothing to stay whole. And when you live from that space, every challenge becomes lighter, every joy becomes deeper, and every moment becomes complete, not because life became easier, but because you finally became steady enough to meet it exactly as it is. When the heart learns to stay calm amid chaos, a new depth of awareness begins to open. The mind becomes clearer, quieter, more spacious. You start to sense life moving through you, breath, pulse, sensation, all in rhythm, all in harmony. In that stillness, there is a doorway waiting. It doesn't lead somewhere far away. It leads inward, into the most ancient rhythm of all, the breath. The breath is not only the bridge between body and mind, it is the bridge between chaos and peace, between confusion and clarity. To rediscover it is to rediscover yourself. Mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati, is one of the Buddha's most profound and practical teachings. It seems simple: inhale, exhale, notice, but within this simplicity lies everything you need to transform the mind. Breathing is not just a survival mechanism, it's a living teacher. Every breath speaks the truth of impermanence, of presence, of letting go. Every inhale is a beginning, every exhale is an ending. When you learn to follow this rhythm consciously, life itself starts to slow down, and peace begins to rise from the very core of your being. Many people breathe, but very few are aware that they are breathing. The body does it automatically, but the mind is rarely there. Most of the time, breathing happens in the background while thoughts rush ahead. That's why the mind feels restless and fragmented. To be mindful of the breath is to return home, to come back to the only moment that ever truly exists, the present one. The breath is a mirror of the mind. When the mind is agitated, the breath becomes shallow and quick. When the mind is calm, the breath softens and slows. But the miracle is that the reverse is also true. When you calm the breath, the mind follows. By working with the rhythm of breathing, you can regulate the entire nervous system. It's the body's natural doorway to peace, accessible anytime, anywhere. In ancient texts, the Buddha called mindfulness of breathing the direct path to liberation. Not because breath is magical, but because awareness of it gathers the scattered pieces of the mind into one point. When you rest your attention on the breath, thoughts begin to lose their power. The endless pull of past and future weakens, and you enter the simple truth of now. Start by observing how your breath feels. Don't try to control it, just notice it. Feel the cool air entering the nose, the chest expanding, the warmth leaving the body. The more you pay attention, the more subtle details appear: the pause between inhale and exhale, the shift of energy across the body. Awareness begins to refine itself, becoming sharper yet gentler. The breath teaches you how to be present without force. At first, the mind will wander. It will chase thoughts, memories, and plans. This is not failure. It's the mind revealing its nature. The practice is not to silence thought, but to return again and again to the breath. Each return strengthens mindfulness, just as lifting a weight strengthens a muscle. Over time, the breath becomes like an anchor. No matter how strong the storm of thought, you can return to this anchor and find stability. As awareness deepens, the breath starts to feel different. It's no longer just air moving in and out. It's life itself flowing through you. The body begins to soften. The heartbeat synchronizes with the breath, and a gentle warmth spreads through the chest. You start to feel connected to something larger, not as a belief, but as a direct experience. The separation between you and life starts to dissolve. You are breathing, but also being breathed. On a physiological level, mindful breathing directly affects the nervous system. When you breathe slowly and consciously, the vagus nerve activates, lowering heart rate and blood pressure. The body shifts from fight or flight to rest and restore. Stress hormones decrease and clarity increases. This is not mystical, it's biology. The ancient practice aligns perfectly with modern science because it works with nature, not against it. Breath also teaches impermanence more intimately than any philosophy. No two breaths are ever the same. Each one comes, fulfills its purpose, and leaves. To fight this flow is to suffer. To flow with it is to live. The breath shows you that control is an illusion, and that peace comes not from forcing life, but from moving with it. As you deepen your practice, you may notice that the breath reflects every emotion. When fear appears, the breath shortens. When joy arises, it expands. When anger burns, it becomes hot and rapid. Each breath tells the story of your inner world. By observing it, you begin to understand yourself without judgment. The breath becomes your most honest teacher. In stressful moments, returning to the breath is like touching still water after heat. When the mind spins with worry, even one conscious exhale can interrupt the cycle. It tells the body, "You are safe now." The nervous system listens, muscles release, thoughts lose their sharpness. You start responding to life instead of reacting to it. That single breath can change the entire direction of your day. The Buddha often compared the mindful breath to a gatekeeper watching a doorway. Every breath entering and leaving is like a traveler passing through. The gatekeeper doesn't stop them. He simply notices. In the same way, you watch the breath enter and leave awareness. Nothing to add, nothing to remove. This quiet watching creates mental clarity, a state where thoughts can come and go without pulling you along. There's also a natural rhythm in breath that connects you to everything around you. Every inhale you take contains the exhale of trees. Every exhale you release becomes part of another's inhale. Breathing mindfully awakens a sense of unity, that you are not a separate being moving through the world, but a participant in a shared cycle of life. Awareness expands from the body to the environment, from I to we. Mindful breathing also rewires how you relate to discomfort. When tension or pain arises, the mind usually reacts with avoidance or fear. But when you bring the breath into that area, something changes. You don't escape the sensation, you soften around it. You allow the breath to hold the discomfort, and slowly the edges dissolve. This is not about erasing pain, it's about transforming the way you hold it. The breath becomes a container strong enough to hold both peace and pain without resistance. With time, the breath reveals subtler truths. You start noticing how craving shows up in it, the slight pull when you want more air, or the tension when you try to control it. You see how the same patterns of desire appear in thought and behavior. Each breath becomes a mirror, reflecting how attachment and aversion shape experience. The more clearly you see it, the more naturally the grip loosens. As the body and mind synchronize, awareness deepens beyond words. You begin to feel that the breath is breathing you. It enters and leaves on its own. You were never in charge. You were only pretending to be. This realization brings humility and peace. The ego's boundaries soften, replaced by trust in life's intelligence. The breath has been doing this perfectly since birth, a quiet reminder that existence takes care of itself when you stop interfering. In daily life, mindfulness of breathing becomes a companion. Before speaking, you take a breath. Before reacting, you take a breath. Before worrying, you take a breath. That single act changes the tone of everything. You speak more clearly, listen more deeply, and act more intentionally. The breath gives you the power to pause the small space where awareness replaces habit. Over time, breathing practice transforms from a technique into a way of living. You start breathing through your challenges, your relationships, your work, your thoughts. The breath becomes a rhythm guiding everything, expanding with effort, releasing with rest. You learn that peace is not found in escaping life, but in breathing through it. Modern neuroscience now recognizes this ancient truth. Studies show that slow, rhythmic breathing synchronizes the brain's hemispheres, balancing emotion and logic. It enhances focus and emotional stability. In other words, the breath unites what was divided: body and mind, reason and feeling, self and world. The Buddha didn't need machines to prove it, he experienced it directly. Equanimity and mindfulness of breathing are two sides of the same truth. Equanimity gives you the strength to stay steady amid change. The breath gives you the bridge to return when you drift. Together, they form the foundation of unshakable peace. Even when life pulls you into difficulty, you can always come back one breath at a time. In relationships, this practice transforms communication. When you listen with the breath, you hear not just words, but emotions. You sense the pauses, the unsaid feelings. Breathing while listening keeps the heart open and the ego quiet. You respond instead of reacting, creating understanding instead of conflict. Each breath becomes an act of compassion. In moments of joy, Mindfulness of breathing keeps you grounded. Happiness without awareness quickly turns into attachment. Awareness allows you to enjoy beauty without clinging to it. You savor each breath as if it were a gift, knowing it will pass. That acceptance deepens joy rather than limiting it. Even during restlessness or boredom, the breath offers practice. When nothing seems exciting, the mind searches for stimulation. But the breath teaches you to find depth in simplicity. You discover that peace is not about escaping boredom, but resting inside it. Every inhale and exhale becomes a meditation on contentment. The Buddha taught 16 stages of mindfulness of breathing, from awareness of the body to the realization of impermanence. But even without counting stages, every mindful breath contains the essence of the path. It starts with noticing, deepens into understanding, and ends in liberation. Each breath is a step toward awakening, gentle, continuous, inevitable. At a deeper level, breath reveals non-duality, the absence of separation between inner and outer, self and world. The air you inhale was once part of another being. The air you exhale nourishes the world again. The cycle has no beginning, no owner. When you truly feel this, the illusion of isolation dissolves. You experience yourself not as a fragment, but as flow. Eventually, mindfulness of breathing leads to stillness so deep that breath and awareness merge. The body breathes softly, the mind rests completely, and awareness remains bright and awake. This stillness is not sleep, it's the purest form of aliveness. In that silence, you realize that peace was never something to achieve. It was the nature of awareness all along. As your practice matures, you carry this peace into every movement. Walking becomes breathing in motion, speaking becomes breathing in sound, working becomes breathing in purpose. The line between meditation and life disappears. You are no longer someone who practices mindfulness. You have become mindfulness itself. This is the unshakable peace the Buddha spoke of, a peace not dependent on conditions, a calm that no noise can disturb. It is the peace of a mind that breathes with life instead of resisting it. Every breath becomes a reminder, here I am alive, this moment is enough. So, as you rest now, bring your attention gently to the breath. Feel it without effort entering, leaving, flowing. Let the body move naturally, let the mind settle quietly. Each breath is a bridge back to peace, each exhale a release of everything unnecessary. Stay here breathing, aware, free. The world will continue to move, but you will remain centered. The breath will carry you through joy and sorrow, through noise and silence, through life and beyond. Because in every breath, there is peace, the kind that does not fade, the kind that cannot be shaken. When awareness begins to rest in the breath, a subtle peace fills the body. The world still moves, thoughts still rise, but the heart beats with a rhythm that feels natural again. You begin to sense something deeper, a tenderness that has always been there, quietly waiting beneath the noise. Yet even in this peace, one of the hardest barriers remains: the way you treat yourself. You may breathe calmly, act mindfully, even care deeply for others, but within you, there may still be a quiet cruelty, the inner voice that judges, criticizes, and refuses to forgive. The next step on the path is learning how to meet that voice with love. The Buddha called this metta, loving kindness, not a sentimental emotion, but a deep recognition that you, too, deserve compassion. Most people find it easier to wish others well than to offer that same warmth to themselves. You might forgive a stranger, comfort a friend, but when it comes to your own pain, you tighten. The mind says, I should be stronger. I should know better. I don't deserve kindness until I fix myself. This quiet self-rejection is one of the greatest sources of suffering. Compassion for the self is the medicine that ends it. To understand why this is so important, you must first see how self-criticism operates. The mind believes that being hard on yourself will make you better, that shame produces improvement. But the truth is the opposite. Harshness paralyzes, kindness transforms. A mind at war with itself cannot grow. Just as a seed cannot bloom in poisoned soil, wisdom cannot blossom in self-hatred. When you start treating yourself with care, even your flaws begin to heal on their own. Compassion for the self is not self-pity. It is not saying, "I am a victim." It is saying, "I am human." It's recognizing that imperfection is part of life's design. Every thought, mistake, and emotion is part of the learning process. When you meet your pain with compassion instead of judgment, the energy of resistance softens and understanding begins. This softness is not weakness, it is the courage to stay open when the mind wants to close. The Buddha compared loving kindness to the steady warmth of the Sunday. It shines on all beings equally, no exceptions, no preferences. To practice metta, you start by offering this warmth inward. You might repeat a simple phrase in your heart: "May I be well. May I be at ease. May I be free from suffering." At first, these words may feel mechanical, even awkward. But with time, they begin to penetrate the layers of self-judgment, melting the frozen parts of your heart. In modern life, burnout has become a kind of epidemic. People push themselves beyond limits, believing their worth depends on productivity, success, or constant achievement. When they finally collapse, they feel guilt instead of rest. This is the cycle of self-cruelty disguised as ambition. Loving kindness breaks this cycle. It reminds you that rest is not laziness and that care for the self is not selfishness. When you treat yourself kindly, you replenish the energy that allows you to serve others better. Compassion for the self also helps heal the nervous system. When you constantly criticize yourself, the body stays in a state of alertness, as if under threat. The mind becomes the predator, and the body becomes the prey. But when you speak gently to yourself, the opposite happens. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the heart rate slows, safety returns. You begin to trust yourself again. This physiological shift mirrors what ancient teachings described as meta-energy, the warmth of awareness spreading through the body and mind. One of the greatest misconceptions is that compassion will make you complacent. Many fear that if they stop criticizing themselves, they will stop improving. But the truth is, growth arises naturally when you feel supported. Think of how a child learns, not through fear of punishment, but through encouragement and safety. The same principle applies to the adult mind. When you speak kindly to yourself, creativity and resilience flourish. Kindness opens the path that harshness blocks. To practice compassion for the self, start by noticing your inner dialogue. Throughout the day, listen to how you speak to yourself after mistakes, delays, or disappointments. The tone may surprise you. Often, it's far harsher than how you'd speak to anyone else. This awareness is the first step. When you catch a moment of self-criticism, pause and breathe. Then silently offer yourself a phrase of understanding. "It's okay. I'm learning. This too will pass." Over time, these gentle words reshape the mind's habits. This practice also requires honesty. Compassion does not mean excusing harmful behavior or pretending everything is fine. It means acknowledging what is real without adding cruelty to it. When you make a mistake, admit it. But instead of saying, "I'm terrible," say, "That was unskillful and I will do better." The difference between shame and responsibility is compassion. Shame says, "I am wrong." Responsibility says, "I can change." Another layer of self-compassion is learning to hold your pain without judgment. Most people either suppress their pain or drown in it. The middle way is to hold it with tenderness. When sadness appears, don't try to escape it. Breathe with it. When fear arises, acknowledge it without resistance. The act of allowing is the deepest form of kindness. Pain that is allowed to be felt fully begins to release its grip. Scientific studies on compassion meditation show that people who practice loving kindness develop greater emotional resilience. The brain's empathy centers become more active, and the regions associated with anxiety shrink. But beyond science, the real change is felt directly, a sense of warmth that flows from the heart to every part of your life. You begin to see yourself not as an enemy to fix, but as a friend to care for. When you develop this inner kindness, it naturally extends outward. You start understanding others' struggles more deeply because you've faced your own with tenderness. Judging others becomes less appealing when you've stopped judging yourself. This is why self-compassion is not selfish, it's the root of compassion for all beings. You cannot offer peace to others while rejecting yourself. In relationships, this understanding creates harmony. You stop expecting others to fill the void of your self-criticism. You stop demanding love as proof of your worth. When you are kind to yourself, love becomes sharing rather than seeking. You give freely because you no longer depend on others to tell you that you are enough. That inner security makes your relationships lighter, more genuine, and less burdened by need. Loving kindness also transforms how you face failure. Instead of collapsing into shame, you start seeing failure as part of growth. Compassion doesn't erase mistakes. It helps you learn from them without fear. It says, "You tried. Now try again." This gentle persistence is more powerful than any perfectionist drive. It's steady, patient, and forgiving, the qualities that create lasting change. Practicing metta can also be done formally in meditation. Sit quietly, bring your attention to the heart, and repeat phrases of goodwill. Start with yourself, then extend it to others, friends, neutral people, even those you find difficult. Each circle of kindness strengthens the feeling of universal connection. You realize that the same breath flows through all beings, and that wishing yourself well is not separate from wishing the world well. At first, you might feel resistance. The mind may say, "I don't deserve this love." That resistance is a wound revealing itself. Don't fight it. Include even that feeling in your compassion. Say, "May this part of me be free from pain." The moment you stop excluding any part of yourself from kindness, healing begins. Self-compassion also frees you from the trap of comparison. When you no longer measure your worth by others, life becomes spacious. You stop chasing the illusion of being better and start appreciating being alive. The need to compete fades because compassion replaces fear with contentment. You realize that peace was never about being superior, it was about being gentle with what is. This practice also teaches humility. When you recognize your own flaws with kindness, you understand that everyone is doing their best within their limits. You stop labeling people as good or bad. Instead, you see the shared struggle of being human. Compassion levels the heart. It removes the walls that pride and shame both build. In the context of stress culture, compassion is revolutionary. The modern world rewards exhaustion and labels rest as weakness. People wear busyness as a badge of honor, not realizing they're burning from the inside. Compassion says, you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to prove your worth. It allows you to step off the treadmill of endless striving and rediscover balance. When burnout arises, the first instinct is usually to push harder, but the cure is softness. The more you push, the deeper the fatigue. The more you rest, the clearer the mind becomes. Compassion allows you to trust that taking care of yourself is part of the path, not a distraction from it. When you nurture your body and mind, you're honoring life itself. This understanding also changes how you pursue goals. Instead of moving from self-doubt, you move from self-respect. You still work hard, but the effort feels different, lighter, steadier. infused with care. Success becomes an expression of joy rather than a chase for validation. The process itself becomes fulfilling because it's rooted in kindness. The more you practice compassion, the more your relationship with pain transforms. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" Pain becomes less of a punishment and more of a teacher. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to practice gentleness with yourself. Eventually, compassion becomes your default response to everything: joy, sorrow, success, or failure. You stop fragmenting yourself into parts that deserve love and parts that don't. The boundaries between acceptance and rejection dissolve. What remains is wholeness. You begin to live from the heart, not from the ego. The heart understands what the mind cannot, that healing is not about perfection, but about kindness. When you are kind to yourself, even pain becomes bearable. Even uncertainty becomes sacred. As you rest in this awareness, let the words echo softly: "May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I be peaceful." Feel them like ripples moving outward from your chest, touching every corner of your being. The more you say them, the more they feel true. This compassion is not something you create, it's something you uncover. It was always within you, hidden under the noise of self-judgment. As you breathe with awareness, as you meet each moment with care, that warmth grows naturally, a quiet fire that never burns out. So as you continue your journey, remember this: the path to peace is not only through wisdom, but through kindness. Awareness may show you the truth, but compassion lets you live it. When you can hold yourself with the same tenderness you'd offer a child, you stop fighting against life. You begin to flow with it, softly, freely, without fear. And in that flow, you discover a love that is both personal and boundless, the love that ends self-cruelty, that heals exhaustion, and that transforms your entire relationship with being alive. Compassion for the self is not the final step on the path. It is the step that makes all others possible. When you treat yourself with gentleness, the whole world softens in response. And in that softness, peace takes root not as an idea, but as the very way you exist. When the heart finally learns to treat itself with kindness, something profound begins to unfold. The war inside quiets, and a gentle strength rises in its place. You no longer attack yourself for feeling pain. You meet your emotions like old friends, sometimes messy, sometimes loud, but always human. Yet even as compassion softens the heart, a question still lingers. Why do emotions seem so powerful one moment and then disappear the next? How can something that feels so overwhelming one day feel distant the next? The answer lies in the Buddha's teaching of anicca, impermanence, the truth that nothing, not even your deepest feelings, can last forever. Emotions are waves that rise and fall within awareness. They may feel endless when they are strong, but every emotion is bound by the law of change. Joy peaks and fades, sadness swells and dissolves, fear rises and falls away. The mind, however, resists this truth. It clings to pleasant emotions and fears unpleasant ones. It wants to hold what feels good and escape what feels bad. This grasping and avoidance create anxiety, the illusion that you must control what was never meant to be controlled. Seeing impermanence clearly ends that struggle. When you observe your emotions without interference, you begin to notice their transient nature. What feels unbearable slowly shifts into something else. The intensity of sadness softens into quiet, anger turns into fatigue, fear melts into stillness. Every emotion carries within it the seed of its own ending. The problem is that the mind doesn't wait for the natural fading. It reacts, labels, judges, and tries to fix. These reactions trap the feeling, freezing it into a story that repeats endlessly. Awareness frees it again by allowing it to move. The Buddha compared emotions to clouds passing across the sky. They appear, change shape, and disappear, but the sky itself remains untouched. When you identify with the cloud, I am angry, I am broken, I am anxious, you suffer with it. When you rest as the sky, aware, vast, open, you witness the passing without being swept away. This shift from identification to observation is the heart of freedom. In daily life, emotions often appear suddenly. A memory, a word, a tone of voice, and the body reacts before you even think. The chest tightens, the stomach clenches, the breath shortens. This physical wave is the birth of emotion. It is not your enemy. It's a signal that energy is moving. If you can stay with the pure sensation, the flutter, the pressure, the heat without naming it, it begins to dissolve naturally. Naming solidifies it. Awareness releases it. Understanding impermanence does not mean denying your feelings. It means seeing their nature clearly. The more you resist an emotion, the longer it stays. Resistance is like holding a knot tighter. Awareness, on the other hand, is the hand that slowly loosens it. When you let an emotion arise and pass without clinging or rejection, you experience what true peace feels like, not the absence of feeling, but the absence of struggle. Modern science supports this ancient wisdom. Neuroscience shows that the chemical lifespan of most emotions in the body is about 90 seconds. After that, it is thought, rumination, judgment, story that keeps them alive. The emotion ends, but the mind revives it again and again. The Buddha saw this long before science gave it language. He taught that clinging to pleasant sensations or resisting unpleasant ones gives rise to suffering. Awareness dissolves both. Anxiety, in particular, depends on forgetting impermanence. It convinces you that the discomfort you feel will last forever. It whispers, "You'll always feel this way." And in believing it, the feeling deepens. But if you bring awareness to the breath and observe the emotion directly, you begin to see small changes. The intensity shifts, the body relaxes slightly, the edges soften. Even when anxiety feels huge, it moves in waves. Awareness rides the wave until it fades into stillness. Every time you observe an emotion with patience, you weaken the illusion of permanence. You start to trust that no storm lasts forever. This trust brings courage. You no longer fear feeling. You no longer run from discomfort. You know that even pain is temporary, and this knowing turns fear into acceptance. You become the witness of change, not the victim of it. To practice this, bring mindfulness to your emotional states throughout the day. When irritation arises, notice it. Feel where it lives in the body. Observe how it shifts as you breathe. Don't analyze it. Don't justify it. Just watch. When joy arises, do the same. Enjoy it fully, but remember it too will pass. This is not pessimism, it's balance. By accepting impermanence, you appreciate every feeling without clinging to it. The mind may ask, if everything passes, what's the point of feeling? The answer is that emotions are not meant to be possessions, they are messages. They arise to show you something, an unmet need, an unconscious attachment, an opportunity to grow. Once the message is received, the emotion dissolves. Clinging to it after its purpose is fulfilled is like holding on to a letter after you've read it. Awareness lets the experience deliver its wisdom and move on. Understanding impermanence also changes your relationship with happiness. When you stop expecting it to last, you stop being disappointed when it fades. You enjoy it while it's here and let it go when it goes. This makes joy lighter, freer, more genuine. You stop grasping at the moment and start living it. You understand that the beauty of happiness lies in its fleetingness, like music that touches you precisely because it ends. Grief reveals impermanence in a different way. When you lose someone or something dear, the pain feels endless, but even grief moves in waves. It has its own rhythm, intense, quiet, sharp, tender. The mind might not notice this because it's lost in memory. But if you stay present to the sensations of grief, the heaviness in the chest, the ache behind the eyes, you'll see movement even there. The wave comes and goes, like all others. Nothing in life, not even sorrow, stands still. This truth also brings compassion. When you realize your emotions are impermanent, you see that others' emotions are too. You stop taking their anger or sadness so personally. You understand that everyone is being moved by the same winds of feeling. This understanding softens judgment and strengthens connection. You stop demanding permanence from others, constant affection, constant approval, and start allowing them to change too. Impermanence is not a threat, it's a blessing. Without it, nothing could grow. Every transformation in your life, every healing, every lesson, every joy exists because things change. The emotion that hurts today may become the wisdom that saves you tomorrow. When you see this, you stop fearing endings. You start trusting the cycle of renewal. You can deepen this understanding through meditation. Sit quietly and observe the body and breath. As sensations and emotions arise, notice their beginnings, middles, and ends. Watch how anger appears as heat, peaks as tension, and fades into exhaustion or calm. Watch how joy appears as expansion and then settles into contentment. You'll start to see that each emotion has a life cycle, just like waves in the ocean. Seeing this directly weakens attachment to any state. As mindfulness grows, even strong emotions lose their power to dominate you. They become like visitors. They come, they stay a while, they leave. You don't have to lock the door or invite them to live with you. You greet them, learn from them, and let them go. The more you practice this, the less you suffer from emotional highs and lows. Stability arises not because emotions stop, but because you stop identifying with them. Impermanence also reveals the futility of overthinking. The mind tries to freeze emotions into narratives. This always happens. I'll never get better. But the emotion those thoughts describe has already changed. Thought lags behind reality. By clinging to the story, you keep reliving what is no longer true. Awareness cuts through this illusion. It shows you that reality is fluid, always new, always now. When you begin to live from this awareness, you experience freedom even in the middle of emotion. The feeling can still be strong, but it no longer defines you. You can cry without despair, feel anger without cruelty, experience fear without paralysis. You become transparent to emotion, it moves through you without sticking. This is what it means to live in harmony with anicca. In times of stress, reminding yourself of impermanence can shift everything. Say silently, "This too is changing." These words are not a dismissal but a truth. They reconnect you to the flow of life. Even the hardest moment becomes bearable when you know it will end. The breath itself proves it. No inhale lasts forever, no exhale stays. Each moment dies to give birth to the next. This understanding doesn't make life dull. It makes it vivid. When you know everything is temporary, you start to cherish it. The laughter of a friend, the taste of a meal, the sound of rain all become precious because you know they won't last. Awareness of impermanence turns ordinary moments into miracles. It's not the length of experience that gives it meaning, but your presence within it. Sometimes, impermanence is difficult to accept, especially when it touches the people or things you love. But even here lies wisdom. Love deepens when you understand it's fragile. Gratitude replaces ownership. Instead of saying, "This is mine," You say, "This was given." You stop trying to freeze moments and start participating fully in their passing. That participation, that willingness to love what changes, is true maturity. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering because it denies impermanence. When you want joy to last forever, you fear its end. When you want pain to disappear immediately, you resist its presence. Both create tension. Freedom lies in seeing that you can feel fully without needing to control duration. Emotions arise because conditions create them, and they fade when those conditions shift. Awareness trusts this process. In a world obsessed with permanence, youth, success, certainty, understanding impermanence becomes an act of liberation. You stop demanding that life match your expectations. You stop measuring peace by stability. You realize that the only true stability lies in awareness itself, not in what it observes. Everything else, thoughts, emotions, even identities, are like patterns in water. Awareness is the water. To live with this understanding is to live with lightness. You stop clinging to moods or stories. You stop identifying as happy or sad. You simply live, breathing, feeling, witnessing. Each moment rises, lives, and fades like the tide. You learn to surf it rather than drown in it. This is not indifference, it's intimacy with truth. As you rest now, feel the gentle rhythm of your breath again. Notice how it moves, without effort, appearing, changing, disappearing. Let your emotions be like this, flowing, alive, free. There's nothing to fix, nothing to hold. The heart that knows impermanence no longer fears life, it welcomes it. You've seen joy and sorrow come and go countless times, and yet awareness has remained untouched, steady, compassionate. That awareness is your refuge, the space where every emotion fades and peace endures. So when worry rises again, meet it softly and say, "You too will pass." Stay with the breath until the wave subsides. Because every emotion, no matter how fierce, carries within it the same truth: it cannot last. What remains is awareness, clear and still, holding all things and needing nothing. That is the peace the Buddha spoke of, not found by escaping change, but by resting fully within it. When you begin to see the impermanence of emotion, the heart relaxes. You stop fighting what you feel and start flowing with life as it is. The mind learns that no state, no matter how painful or beautiful, can hold you forever. In this freedom, a new understanding begins to dawn. If emotions and experiences arise and fade, what creates them in the first place? Why do certain patterns seem to repeat? Why does the same kind of worry, fear, or restlessness return even when you've seen through it before? The answer lies in the quiet architecture of karma, not as punishment or reward, but as cause and effect. The Buddha called this the karma of thought. Every thought is a seed. Each one carries energy, direction, and consequence. When you think a thought repeatedly, you water that seed until it becomes a habit. The habits of thought shape perception, and perception shapes your world. Karma is not some distant cosmic force waiting to judge you. It is the daily unfolding of your inner garden. The mind is the soil, thought is the seed, and your attention is the water. What you choose to nurture grows, whether it's fear or peace, anger or kindness. To understand this fully, you must see how deeply thought conditions experience. Most people believe they react to reality itself, but in truth, they react to their interpretation of reality, the story built by thought. You may hear a few words, see a look, or face a challenge, and the mind instantly writes a script. That script becomes emotion, and emotion becomes reaction. The cycle continues, and the same karmic seeds keep sprouting. If you don't see this process clearly, you live inside a garden you didn't consciously plant. The Buddha often used the metaphor of seeds because it captures both freedom and responsibility. You cannot change yesterday's harvest, but you can decide what to plant today. Every thought you allow to take root will bear fruit. When you cultivate mindfulness, you begin to choose thoughts instead of being enslaved by them. The mind stops being a wild forest of unconscious growth and becomes a tended field where wisdom can flourish. Thoughts have energy. Each one leaves a subtle imprint on the nervous system, shaping how you perceive future moments. If you repeatedly think, "I am not safe," your body will live in defense. If you think, "I can meet this moment with calm," the body adjusts to that truth. This is the law of cause and effect at work, not mystical, but immediate. Modern neuroscience even shows that repeated thought patterns strengthen neural pathways, literally wiring your brain for the emotions and perceptions you most often choose. The power of karma is neutral. It follows the laws of nature. The seeds you plant don't care about your intentions. They grow according to what they are. Angry thoughts grow anger. Fearful thoughts grow fear. Kind thoughts grow peace. This truth can seem intimidating until you realize it's also your greatest freedom. You are not doomed by the past. You are simply harvesting the fruits of previous thoughts. Change the seeds, and the garden changes. To see how this works, start observing your mind throughout the day. Notice how certain thoughts arise automatically in response to events. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and irritation blooms instantly. That irritation might not even be about the event itself. It could be the echo of years of impatience, planted and watered every time you reacted the same way. When you see this, you understand that the present moment is not random, it's the flowering of mental karma. Awareness allows you to interrupt the cycle. When you catch a thought as it arises, you create a gap between impulse and identification. In that gap, you have a choice to water it or to let it dry out. The more often you make that choice consciously, the weaker negative habits become. This is not about suppressing thoughts, but about starving unwholesome ones of energy. Awareness is sunlight. It illuminates what was hidden. Once you see the process clearly, automatic thinking begins to lose its grip. This also reveals how positive thought is not forced optimism, but alignment with truth. When you plant thoughts rooted in reality, "I can breathe through this. This will pass. I am more than this feeling." You are not escaping life. You are responding to it wisely. Positive thinking without awareness is fantasy. Mindful thinking is transformation. It rewires the mind to respond with clarity instead of fear. The Buddha taught that every mental act carries intention. Karma is born not from what you think or do in isolation, but from the motive behind it. Two people can speak the same words, but if one speaks from love and the other from ego, the karmic imprint is entirely different. This is why mindfulness of intention is so vital. Before you speak, before you act, even before you think deeply on something, pause and ask, what is the energy behind this? Is it fear, pride, compassion, or understanding? That small inquiry changes the course of your karma immediately. When you begin to work with your thoughts consciously, you start to see that the mind has layers. Some thoughts are surface-level, fleeting, light, and harmless. Others are rooted deeply in belief and emotion. These deeper seeds create the strongest patterns. For example, the belief, "I am not enough," may produce countless smaller thoughts of comparison, jealousy, and anxiety. If you address only the surface thoughts, they will grow back. But if you bring awareness to the root belief and see its emptiness, the entire pattern collapses. This is how mindfulness uproots old karma, not by fighting it, but by understanding its source. The Buddha described this process as mental cultivation, developing wholesome states and abandoning unwholesome ones. He compared it to a farmer who clears weeds, waters healthy plants, and protects new growth. The farmer doesn't yell at the soil or complain about the weather. He simply tends to the field with patience. In the same way, you nurture wholesome thoughts, gratitude, compassion, wisdom through steady attention. Over time, they become your new defaults, shaping a mind that naturally leans toward peace. A powerful exercise for this is noticing your mental diet. Just as the body becomes what it eats, the mind becomes what it consumes. What kind of information, conversations, and media are you feeding it? Do they nourish clarity or agitation? Many people try to calm their minds while constantly absorbing noise that fuels anxiety. Being mindful of what enters your awareness is an act of karmic intelligence. You cannot plant roses in soil constantly seeded with thorns. It's also important to recognize that thoughts are not equally strong. A thought accompanied by emotion is like a seed watered by rain. It grows faster. When you think with intensity, the energy sinks deeper into the mind. This is why repetitive worry feels so heavy, it's mental karma-gathering force. But the same principle applies to loving kindness and gratitude. When you infuse thought with genuine feeling, its power multiplies. That's how compassion reshapes not just mood, but destiny. Karma is not only personal, it's collective. The thoughts of individuals influence the energy of families, communities, even societies. When many people cultivate fear, the atmosphere thickens with it. When many people cultivate peace, the world softens. Each thought you plant contributes to the shared garden of consciousness. This understanding brings both responsibility and hope. Even a single act of mindful thinking adds light to the collective field. To transform mental karma, you must first stop being its prisoner. This begins with self-awareness, seeing that thoughts are events, not identities. Just as a storm passes through the sky, thoughts pass through awareness. When you stop saying, "I am this thought," and start saying, "This is a thought," you free yourself. That freedom allows you to choose which thoughts to engage with. Some will fade if ignored, others will flourish if nurtured. The choice becomes yours again. One of the most overlooked aspects of karma is how it relates to speech. Words are thoughts made audible. When you speak from anger or fear, you solidify those emotions in yourself and in others. When you speak from kindness, you strengthen that energy in both hearts. This is why mindful speech is considered one of the highest forms of practice. It is thought in motion, creating karma that echoes beyond what you can see. Another key to understanding the karma of thought is noticing its subtle persistence. Even when you are silent, the mind speaks. It comments, compares, judges, plans. Each of these silent sentences plants seeds. Most are small, but when repeated often, they form grooves in consciousness. These grooves become your mental habits, and habits shape destiny. Awareness smooths those grooves by interrupting repetition. Each moment of mindfulness is a fresh start, new soil for new seeds. When you begin to see the law of cause and effect within your own mind, faith in awareness grows. You realize you no longer need to fear your thoughts. You can work with them, guide them, and transform them. You stop waiting for external change and start cultivating inner alignment. Peace stops being something to find and becomes something you grow. This practice also brings humility. You see that your suffering was not punishment, but the natural outcome of unconscious seeds. When you recognize this, guilt dissolves, replaced by wisdom. You understand that every mind, including yours, is learning through cause and effect. Compassion replaces blame for yourself and for others. You realize that no one escapes this law, but everyone can use it to awaken. The process of planting wholesome mental seeds begins with intention. You can start each morning with simple awareness. Today, I will think thoughts that bring peace. It's not about forcing positivity, it's about choosing clarity. Throughout the day, remind yourself that every reaction is a seed. If anger arises, notice it and breathe before it hardens into speech. If gratitude appears, let it linger. These small choices accumulate like drops of rain, nourishing the roots of calm. In meditation, you can work with thoughts directly. As they arise, label them gently. Fear, planning, judgment, memory. This labeling brings distance without rejection. You start to see thought as movement, not truth. Once labeled, it loses its power to drag you along. Then consciously plant a new thought: kindness, patience, forgiveness. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes. You are retraining the soil of the mind to yield peace. It's also vital to understand that wholesome thoughts are not merely positive, but aligned with reality. Everything is fine is not a wholesome thought if it denies truth. This is difficult, but I can meet it with patience. Wholesomeness arises from wisdom and compassion working together. It's grounded optimism rooted in awareness of impermanence, yet open to possibility. As this practice matures, thought itself begins to quiet. The mind no longer produces endless commentary because the need to control experience fades. Karma continues, but it becomes lighter, guided by understanding rather than compulsion. You start to see that awareness, not thought, is the true source of peace. Thought is the servant, not the master. When you know this, you use thought as a tool instead of being used by it. In time, the field of your mind becomes more peaceful. You notice the difference between thoughts that contract and thoughts that expand. The contracting ones are rooted in fear. They tighten the body and narrow perception. The expanding ones open the heart and deepen breath. Through mindfulness, you choose expansion again and again until it becomes the natural state. Karma also reveals that nothing is wasted. Even painful thoughts, when seen clearly, can become fertilizer for wisdom. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every dark emotion, once understood, enriches the soil for compassion. Awareness turns all experience into growth. There are no weeds in a mindful garden, only plants that need tending in different ways. Eventually, you start to feel the subtle shift in energy when a wholesome thought takes root. It feels lighter, warmer, more spacious. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, and awareness brightens. These sensations are signs that peace is growing. You don't have to believe in karma to feel it. It's right there, unfolding moment by moment. Living this truth changes everything. You stop blaming the world for your moods. You stop expecting happiness to come from control. You realize that your experience is a living reflection of the thoughts you nurture. Peace becomes a habit because you practice it internally. The external world may remain unpredictable, but your inner world becomes steady, fertile, alive. So as you sit quietly now, notice the quality of your thoughts. Some may be gentle, others harsh. Don't fight them. Simply recognize that each is a seed. Ask yourself which garden you wish to grow, one of worry or one of peace, one of fear or one of freedom. Then, with each breath, choose consciously. Think softly, think wisely, think with love. The field of your mind will respond in kind. Every thought matters, every seed counts. And in the end, it is not karma that rules you. It is your own awareness that guides how the garden grows. When you begin to understand that every thought plants a seed, awareness becomes sharper. You start to see how the landscape of the mind is shaped by what you allow to grow within it. Some thoughts nourish peace, while others feed anxiety. The garden of the mind is alive, it's always being fed, watered, and cultivated. But what exactly feeds it? Why do certain moods return again and again, even when we think we've let them go? The Buddha answered this question through the teaching of the four nutriments, the four kinds of food that sustain not just the body, but the entire cycle of suffering or serenity. We often think of nourishment only as physical, what we eat or drink. Yet the mind too eats constantly. It consumes impressions, ideas, sensations, and intentions. Every moment, something is feeding your state of being. Some food strengthens clarity, some poisons it. Understanding this is like learning to read the labels of what you're feeding your mind with. It gives you the power to stop consuming what causes stress and to start choosing what nurtures peace. The first nutriment is physical food, the nourishment that sustains the body. On the surface, this seems simple, but in the Buddha's view, how you relate to food reflects your relationship with desire itself. Eating is not just biological, it's emotional and mental. When the mind is restless, food becomes escape. When the heart is empty, consumption becomes comfort. Yet food taken with mindfulness becomes a practice of presence. When you eat with awareness, noticing texture, flavor, and gratitude, you reconnect the body and mind. Each bite becomes a lesson in moderation, appreciation, and impermanence. The body needs food, but stress arises when craving turns necessity into indulgence. What you eat also affects the mind's stability. Heavy, processed, or overly stimulating food can dull or agitate awareness, while simple, balanced meals support clarity. This is not about restriction, but respect, seeing food as a form of energy that supports consciousness. The Buddha advised moderation because balance in eating creates balance in thought. Overconsumption dulls mindfulness. Deprivation breeds obsession. The middle way applies even at the table. The second nutriment is sensory contact, what you allow through the gates of your senses. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind are constantly consuming the world. Each sight, sound, and thought leaves an impression, shaping emotion and perception. In modern life, this form of nutrition may be the most neglected. People bombard their senses from the moment they wake: screens, noise, scrolling, constant stimulation. The result is mental indigestion, an overfed but undernourished mind. When the senses are overwhelmed, anxiety naturally increases. The nervous system never rests. Attention fragments. This is why silence and simplicity feel so healing. They give the senses time to digest experience. To practice mindfulness of sensory contact is to become aware of what you let in. What kind of sounds fill your environment? What kind of images occupy your mind? What kind of conversations shape your thoughts? You begin to notice which sensory foods create peace and which create unrest. Choosing healthy sensory input doesn't mean isolating yourself from life. It means selecting with awareness. Just as you wouldn't eat spoiled food, you stop feeding your mind with violence, gossip, or comparison. You start seeking impressions that elevate rather than drain. The scent of a flower, the sound of the wind, the sight of morning light, these are forms of nourishment too. They remind the senses of stillness. Over time, your attention becomes more refined. You learn to feed on subtle beauty instead of constant noise. The third nutriment is mental volition, the intention or will that drives behavior. This is the food of motivation, the force that pushes every action. What you desire, what you strive for, what you cling to, these are the flavors of volition. Some are wholesome, arising from love, generosity, and wisdom. Others are unwholesome, born from greed, fear, or delusion. The Buddha taught that whatever you constantly desire becomes the shape of your life. The hunger of the heart is more powerful than the hunger of the stomach. Modern stress culture thrives on unhealthy volition. Society teaches people to chase endlessly more success, more recognition, more control. This constant striving feeds restlessness. You begin to live in a future that never arrives. The craving for achievement becomes a kind of spiritual malnutrition. No matter how much you consume, you feel empty. True nourishment comes from intention aligned with awareness, action guided by understanding rather than by compulsion. When volition is rooted in kindness, life feels lighter. When it's driven by fear or competition, tension grows. The practice here is to pause before acting and ask, what is feeding this desire? Is it love or insecurity? Is it service or ego? Each choice reinforces a certain state of mind. Acting from compassion strengthens compassion. Acting from anxiety strengthens anxiety. The quality of volition determines whether the mind expands or contracts. The fourth nutriment is consciousness itself, the subtle stream of awareness that is constantly renewed by contact with the world. Consciousness feeds on experience. It's like a flame sustained by fuel. Each perception, emotion, and memory becomes nourishment for awareness. When consciousness feeds on wholesome impressions, it becomes clear and calm. When it feeds on negativity or delusion, it becomes clouded. This is the deepest level of nutrition, the cycle that sustains the sense of self. To understand this, notice how certain mental states seem to reinforce themselves. When you dwell on worry, the mind produces more things to worry about. When you focus on gratitude, more things appear to be grateful for. This is the feedback loop of consciousness feeding on its own creations. Awareness is both the eater and the eaten. To break the cycle of stress, you must feed consciousness with presence rather than reactivity. These four nutriments are not separate. They intertwine constantly. What you eat affects your senses. What your senses take in shapes your volition. What you intend sustains your consciousness. The entire chain of experience is nourished moment by what you consume physically, mentally, and emotionally. If you want to understand stress, don't just look at your thoughts. Look at what you're feeding them with. To work with these nutriments skillfully, mindfulness becomes your guide. Before eating, pause and acknowledge the food as energy from the earth, as life supporting life. Before exposing yourself to information, ask if it will uplift or burden your mind. Before pursuing a goal, check if it's born from peace or insecurity. Before indulging a repetitive thought, ask if it brings clarity or confusion. This kind of inquiry doesn't take time. It creates time, the spaciousness of awareness that prevents unconscious consumption. Over time, the results of mindful nourishment become visible. The body grows lighter because you eat with awareness, not impulse. The mind grows clearer because you consume fewer distractions. The heart grows softer because your intentions become pure. Consciousness itself becomes luminous, no longer sustained by craving but by wisdom. You begin to feel harmony between inner and outer nourishment. In this process, moderation is key. Extreme control creates tension. Unconscious indulgence creates dullness. The middle way is the art of balance, eating enough, seeing enough, doing enough, but not drowning in excess. Even beauty, when consumed without pause, can tire the senses. True satisfaction arises from rhythm, the alternation of engagement and rest, sound and silence, activity and stillness. Each nutriment can either feed stress or feed peace. Food becomes stress when eaten with greed, peace when eaten with gratitude. Sensory contact becomes stress when it's unfiltered, peace when it's chosen wisely. Volition becomes stress when it's driven by craving, peace when guided by compassion. Consciousness becomes stress when lost in distraction, peace when nourished by awareness. To apply this understanding practically, start small. Notice the first few minutes after waking. What's the first thing you feed your mind? Is it silence, gratitude, or the flood of notifications and news? That moment sets the tone for the day. Throughout the day, notice what you feed your attention to. Each focus is a meal for the mind. You cannot control every stimulus, but you can choose which to swallow and which to let pass. This teaching also reveals how collective stress is formed. A society that constantly feeds on fear-based news, competitive values, and endless consumption will naturally feel anxious. The same law applies individually. The mind reflects its diet. When you start feeding it stillness, compassion, and wisdom, peace becomes the natural flavor of your life. To deepen this awareness, reflect regularly on how each nutriment affects your energy. After a meal, ask how it feels in the body: heavy, light, alive. After scrolling through information, notice your mood: inspired or restless. After acting on a desire, feel the aftermath: content or craving more. These reflections are not moral judgments, they are direct observations. They show you what truly nourishes and what drains. The Buddha once said that liberation begins when you see the food that sustains suffering. When you stop feeding what causes pain, it naturally fades. This means you don't need to fight worry or craving directly. You only need to stop nourishing them. Anxiety cannot survive when you stop feeding it attention, fear, and self-judgment. In the same way, peace thrives when you keep feeding it presence, gratitude, and understanding. The four nutriments are not commandments, they are mirrors. They show you how life feeds on life, how everything you take in shapes consciousness. They reveal that stress is not random, it's a result of what the mind consumes. Awareness transforms this relationship. You begin to eat, see, and think with reverence, knowing that every intake becomes part of who you are. As your mindfulness deepens, even breathing becomes nourishment. You sense that each breath feeds the body and the mind alike. The simple act of breathing consciously becomes a reminder that life itself is a form of nutrition. You are constantly being fed by existence, by air, light, sound, and awareness. When you meet this flow with gratitude, life starts to taste different. Eventually, the boundaries between the four nutriments dissolve. Eating becomes meditation, seeing becomes prayer, acting becomes mindfulness. Consciousness itself becomes self-sustaining, feeding on awareness rather than craving. In this state, worry starves. The mind no longer feeds on stress because it no longer needs it. It has learned to draw energy from peace itself. So, as you sit quietly now, take a deep breath and feel the nourishment of that single act. The body receives air. The mind receives calm. Reflect on how everything you take in: food, images, thoughts, intentions, shapes the quality of your being. Choose consciously. Feed what brings clarity. Starve what breeds confusion. When you live with this understanding, every moment becomes a meal shared with life itself. You no longer consume unconsciously, you participate with reverence. The more you feed awareness, the less you crave distraction. The more you feed peace, the weaker stress becomes. This is the essence of the four nutriments, the wisdom of feeding the mind and heart with what truly sustains. When you master this art, worry fades not because you fought it, but because it no longer finds nourishment in you. And what remains is quiet strength, a mind that eats peace, breathes clarity, and lives in harmony with the rhythm of life. When you begin to see that worry feeds on what the mind consumes, a new kind of freedom starts to form. You realize that peace is not something you wait for, it's something you nurture through every choice of attention, every act of awareness. What you feed grows, and what you stop feeding fades. Yet even with this clarity, one last thread of tension often remains: the attachment to how things turn out. You may eat mindfully, think kindly, act wisely, and still find anxiety lingering beneath the surface. Why? Because the mind keeps asking, what will happen? It clings not to the present effort, but to its imagined result. That craving for control, for certainty, is the seed of restlessness. The next step is learning the art of detachment from outcome, acting fully, but without anxiety about where your actions will lead. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean giving up or withdrawing from life. It means giving yourself completely to what you are doing while releasing the obsession with result. The Buddha taught that clinging to results creates suffering because outcomes are never truly ours. We can control intention and effort, but not consequence. The law of cause and effect is vast, shaped by countless conditions beyond our reach. When we try to force it, we fight the flow of reality. But when we act with clarity and let go of the rest, peace arises naturally. Most people act under the illusion that happiness depends on outcomes, on success, approval, recognition, or security. They measure their worth by what happens after the act, not by the quality of the act itself. This creates a life of tension. Every decision becomes a gamble, every effort a test. Detachment frees you from this cage. It shifts your focus from reward to presence, from the fear of failure to the joy of sincere action. To understand this deeply, look at how the mind clings to results in daily life. When you work on a task, you're rarely just working, you're projecting into the future. You think of how others will judge it, whether it will succeed, whether it will secure your place. This projection steals the peace of the present. You lose the richness of the process because your attention is trapped in outcomes you cannot control. Detachment brings you back to now, the only moment where true effectiveness exists. The Buddha often taught that craving and aversion are the twin roots of suffering. Craving is the desire for pleasure or success. Aversion is the fear of pain or failure. Both are forms of attachment to outcome. Detachment breaks both at once by focusing on right effort rather than right result. When you act from understanding instead of desire, every action becomes free of tension. You do what must be done, not because you crave the fruit, but because the doing itself is your practice. This approach mirrors what later traditions called karma yoga, the discipline of selfless action. But in Buddhism, it goes even further. It is not only about serving others, it is about transcending the illusion of control. When you give your best and then release the result, your energy becomes pure. You act with precision but without fear. You care deeply but without anxiety. This is the essence of right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness working together. You can see this truth clearly in nature. The tree gives fruit, but it does not know who will eat it. The river flows, but it does not choose where the water will end. Life itself acts without ownership. When you align your actions with this rhythm, stress dissolves. You no longer act from scarcity or self-importance. You act because life flows through you as intention, and when the act is complete, you release it to the universe. The mind, however, resists this freedom. It has been trained to equate control with safety. It believes that if it plans, predicts, and manipulates enough, everything will go as it should. But life is not a mechanical equation. It is an interdependent web of causes. Even the smallest event depends on countless factors: timing, weather, people, chance. To demand control over outcomes is to demand ownership over the universe. Awareness sees the impossibility of that and relaxes. Detachment is not laziness or fatalism. It doesn't mean sitting back and letting things happen. It means doing your part with total sincerity while understanding that the result is not entirely yours. The Buddha described this as acting without attachment to the fruit of action. You still plant seeds, but you stop trying to control the rain. When the harvest comes. You accept it whether it's plenty or little with the same steady mind. This balance between effort and release brings immense relief. You stop overworking the mind. You stop worrying about how the future will unfold. When effort is pure, action becomes meditation. You enter a state of flow where everything happens naturally. The body moves, the mind observes, and life unfolds through you rather than against you. In modern life, detachment is especially challenging because society constantly reinforces outcome-driven behavior. From school to work, people are rewarded for results, not for awareness. The message is, succeed or fail, win or lose, be approved or be forgotten. This conditioning creates chronic anxiety. Even small actions become burdened by invisible expectations. To break this pattern, you must shift your measure of success. Instead of asking, "Did I get what I wanted?" ask, "Did I act with clarity and compassion?" When your measure changes, anxiety begins to disappear. Detachment also transforms relationships. Much of relational pain comes from expectations wanting others to behave, feel, or respond a certain way. You give affection, hoping for reciprocation. You speak truth, hoping to be understood. When that doesn't happen, disappointment arises. But when love is offered freely without demand, it becomes peaceful. You still care deeply, but the caring is unconditional. Detachment allows love to be pure, not transactional. To practice this, begin with awareness of subtle craving. When you act, pause afterward and notice the thoughts that follow. I hope they liked it. I wonder if it was enough. What if it fails? These are signs of attachment. Instead of fighting them, recognize them and return to presence. Say quietly, I have done my part, now life will do the rest. This phrase helps loosen the grip of ownership. It reminds the mind that reality unfolds through countless streams, not just your effort. Detachment also invites humility. It reminds you that you are part of a larger flow, not its master. Every success and failure is co-created by conditions far beyond your vision. The rain that nourishes crops also brings floods. The same wind that cools can destroy. You begin to respect the mystery of existence. In this humility, peace arises not because everything goes your way, but because you no longer demand that it should. This understanding deepens mindfulness itself. When the mind stops fixating on what's next, awareness expands. You begin to see the texture of each moment, the subtle sounds, the rhythm of breath, the small joys of action. Work becomes alive. Communication becomes sincere. Even mundane acts take on sacred depth because you're finally here, not in some imagined future. Detachment from outcome also breaks the illusion of personal doership. The ego thrives on ownership. I did this. I failed at that. This is mine. It attaches to outcomes because they define its identity. Success inflates it. Failure deflates it. But when you see that action happens through conditions, thoughts, training, circumstances, opportunities, you realize there is no single I doing anything. The ego loses its grip, and what remains is effortless participation in life. In Buddhism, this understanding is called anatta, the insight of non-self. Detachment from outcome is its practical expression. When you stop clinging to results, you stop feeding the illusion that outcomes can define you. You act from awareness, not from identity. You no longer say, I succeeded, or I failed. You simply say, that happened. This does not make you detached from responsibility, it makes you free from self-importance. Modern psychology supports this wisdom. Studies show that people who focus on the process rather than the result experience more satisfaction, resilience, and creativity. They perform better because they are not clouded by anxiety. This is the same principle the Buddha taught centuries ago. Right action arises naturally from right attention. The mind that is calm performs wisely. The mind that clings performs anxiously. You can test this truth immediately. Take any task, writing an email, cooking, speaking to someone, and do it as fully as you can. When it's done, let it go completely. Don't reanalyze or replay it. Notice how light you feel. That lightness is freedom from attachment. It's the absence of worry that normally follows every act. The more you practice this, the more peaceful you become, even amid uncertainty. Detachment also reveals that failure and success are not opposites but teachers. When you are attached, failure feels devastating. When you are detached, failure becomes information. You see what worked, what didn't, and you move on. The emotional heaviness disappears because identity is not at stake. The same applies to success. It's enjoyed, but not clung to. You remain steady through both, like a mountain unmoved by wind. This equanimity turns life into practice. Every situation, pleasant or unpleasant, becomes an opportunity to deepen awareness. You act, observe, and release. Over time, this rhythm becomes natural. You stop trying to manipulate the flow of events and start dancing with it. Even uncertainty becomes your ally because you trust the intelligence of impermanence. To cultivate detachment from outcome, mindfulness of intention is essential. Before any action, clarify your purpose. If your intention is sincere to be kind, to be truthful, to do your best, the outcome no longer defines you. When the mind wanders into worry about results, bring it back to intention. Remind yourself, my role is to act rightly. The rest belongs to conditions beyond me. This perspective brings a quiet confidence, not arrogance, but trust in the process of Dharma itself. Detachment also strengthens compassion. When you no longer cling to outcomes, you can help others without needing gratitude or success. You give because giving itself is joy. You support because compassion is its own reward. This selfless action becomes deeply healing for others and for yourself. You stop burning out because your energy no longer depends on validation. As this understanding deepens, even desire transforms. It doesn't vanish. It becomes purified. You still have goals, but they are no longer tied to self-worth. You move toward them with ease, knowing that the journey matters more than the destination. Desire guided by awareness becomes aspiration, not craving. The fire still burns, but it warms instead of consuming. In moments of anxiety, this teaching becomes a refuge. When the mind races about the future, results, outcomes, possibilities, pause and breathe. Feel the body. Recognize that anxiety is attachment in disguise, then gently let it go. Say inwardly, I release the result. You will feel a subtle shift, the muscles ease, the breath deepens, the present returns. That moment is the essence of freedom. Over time, detachment from outcome changes how you experience life itself. You stop dividing moments into good and bad. You see that everything contributes to awakening. Success humbles you. Failure strengthens you. Gain and loss become teachers, not judges. You live in harmony with cause and effect, trusting that every action, when done with awareness, creates the right unfolding, even if you can't see it immediately. When you live this way, you discover that peace is not found in control, but in surrender. Surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the realization that life has always been unfolding on its own, that your task was never to control it, only to participate fully. So as you rest here, take a breath and let the tension around what happens next soften. You've done what you could, that is enough. The universe moves through countless causes, and you are one of them. Let your actions flow like rivers, purposeful, sincere, and free. In this release, anxiety loses its foundation. You no longer live for outcomes, you live in alignment. And in alignment, even ordinary acts shine with peace. The doing becomes its own reward, the present becomes its own fulfillment, and the future unfolds as it must, quietly, naturally, and always in rhythm with the greater flow of life. As the mind grows still and the breath softens, every teaching you've heard tonight begins to settle into place like gentle rain soaking into the earth. You've walked through the wisdom of awareness, silence, balance, non-identification, compassion, impermanence, and freedom from control. Each one has been a doorway back to what was always waiting beneath the noise piece that does not depend on circumstance. You've learned that stress fades when you stop feeding it, that emotions lose their power when you let them flow, that calm is not the absence of movement but the presence of understanding. You've seen that the mind, once an enemy, can become your greatest ally when treated with patience and love. As you drift towards sleep, let all effort go. Let the breath move on its own. Let awareness rest in itself. The journey doesn't end here, it continues in every choice, every thought, every act of kindness you carry into tomorrow. Because peace isn't something you visit, it's something you practice, moment by moment, breath by breath. If these teachings spoke to you tonight, share your reflection in the comments. What truth touched your heart the most? Your insight may be the light someone else needs. And if you want more guidance to stay calm, grounded, and awake in daily life, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next step on this path toward peace. Now, close your eyes. Let go of the day. The Dharma has already begun its quiet work within you. Rest easy. You are safe. You are free. And you are home.